Thanks for 10 subscribers. Here is a compilation of all of the best stories this month.
First story.
I've been getting freaky with my cousin and it feels so good. At the age of about 20, I was living the high life, and happy in every aspect of my life. Then, my cousin, a year and change younger than me, is moving into my parents' place for college. Shortly after finding this out, I lost my job. This cousin grated on my nerves when we were younger. Well, she's grown, all woman-like and whatnot. Mind you, I'd never had a girlfriend or anything. Never played the game or any of that jazz. She comes in and we start connecting in ways I'd never connected with someone before. She was close enough to my age that I had someone that I could almost relate to. I was ecstatic. Then I started to notice strange behavior from her. She would get closer to me, lean on me, touch me, etc. Could have been friendly. That started the gears turning, and in the wrong direction. That's when I noticed that she was actually quite unbelievably hot. Little body, pretty face. So how does it go from her casually coming onto me, to full-blown playing around with each other? We were watching a movie in her room. We were on a bed. She was complaining of a sore back. I offered a back massage, of course. I had done this for guys and girls alike, especially as an instructor dealing with people with back issues. I proceed to attempt to gently work out the knots, feeling her nice back through the flannel night shirt. She was a size A, so she didn't generally wear a bra to bed, so nothing to get in the way there. Then she asked if taking off her shirt would make things easier. My heart started pounding. I wasn't sure if I wanted to say yes because it really would make the job easier, or if I wanted to say yes because I wanted to see her beautiful back, and possibly chest. Regardless, I said yes. I start working her back a little bit nicer, and eventually move up to her neck. Knowing the key and sensitive nodes, I started working those that would affect her more intimately. It became too much work to handle the neck while she was resting on her chest, so I recommended she get up and sit in front of me. She did so, and I averted my eyes and handed her the shirt. At this point all my hormones are shooting off, and probably have adrenaline running through me. Anywho, she puts the shirt on and faces away from me. I continue to work on the neck. She started to move closer to me, leaning back further and further, until I realized that she didn't button up her shirt, and one breast was clearly hanging out. Heaven, she was practically laying on me at this time, and I, scared, but oh so curious, started reaching down further and further, stroking the top of her chest and neck, and finally making it to her beautiful breasts. So soft and supple, she was reeling in the ecstasy of getting touched. Things went downhill from there, and a semi-broken relationship that lasted about a year and a half ensued before she finally cheated on me, but we did a lot of mutual touching. She was my first real relationship, as much as that is, and to be honest she was kinda bad.
Next story.
My wife and her best friend accused me of having an affair, then got angry when I didn't have one. I 31 male and my wife 29 female had a baby last December. It was a traumatic birth and my wife developed postpartum depression. While she was originally going to go back to work after the birth, she's been struggling enough that we decided to wait until our daughter was a year old and reassess. She has been going to therapy weekly, with my wife home full time. I've had to work increased hours. This is something we discussed prior to making this decision and she knew this from the start. A few weeks ago, my boss approached me about a project that would require a lot of overtime in a short amount of time. It would both be great financially and for my career. I talked to my wife about it and she agreed that I should say yes to my boss. For the 4 weeks I'd be working on this, my mother-in-law and her best friend Jessie, 29 female, would come help out with some of the duties that I typically do. Jessie is a stay-at-home mom with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. She began coming over during the day and would watch the kids with my wife. 3 weeks into the project, it became clear that we'd need a few more weeks to get it together. I went home that night and talked to my wife about it. She said she was okay with it, but got very cold in the days after. It wasn't unusual behavior over the past few months, so I didn't think much about it and tried not to take it personally. During the last week of the project, I got home one night and saw that Jessie was still at the house. I didn't think much about it, said hi to her and my wife, and then went to go check on our daughter. Before I could get to her room, I heard Jessie say something along the lines of, "He doesn't even stop to greet you. Definitely a sign." I turned around and asked what it was a sign of. Immediately, my wife started crying and Jessie started accusing me of having an affair. She told me that I must hate my wife because she has postpartum depression and am not attracted to her because she gained weight from the pregnancy. Neither of these things are true. I'm trying my best to help my wife through her postpartum depression while supporting our family, and I think she looks great how she is right now. She just hasn't wanted to have sex and I haven't pushed. Jessie then demanded to see my phone. I told her no. She told me that's a sign that I'm guilty. I told my wife that I would let her see my phone if she wanted to. She nodded and something inside me broke. I guess it was the thought that she actually believed I was having an affair really got to me, and that she didn't trust me after everything we've been through. Well, she looked through the phone and there was no evidence. Jessie started saying that I deleted the evidence. She started screaming and woke up our daughter, so I told her to get out of the house. Eventually, she left and I went to calm our daughter since my wife was still on the couch crying. When my daughter was asleep again, I sat down by my wife and tried to talk to her about what's been happening. She told me that she's been worried ever since I started working all the overtime. I told her that we'd talked about how good of an opportunity it was and she agreed to letting me take on this project. She said it was very suspicious to increase the length of the project. I told her that sometimes that happens. She wanted more evidence, so I showed her messages and emails with timestamps from work and pay stubs showing the overtime. She said she believed me and was sorry for doubting me. It was just that Jessie had been telling her that these were all signs that I was cheating. I asked her why she believed Jessie more than me, and why she didn't come to me with her concerns. She didn't have a real answer. It's been a couple weeks and the project is over. I actually scaled back and am trying to work a little less than I was before the project so I can spend more time with my wife and daughter. But I feel so burnt out trying to do everything and becoming resentful because in the back of my mind, I know that my wife doesn't trust me. I ask myself, what happens the next time I have a project, or I have to run errands one day, or if I have a business trip, am I going to come back every time to accusations that I'm cheating? I've tried bringing it up a couple times but my wife tells me it's not the time and that she's tired or sad. I try to be mindful of her feelings but I wonder if that means that I can never have any of my own. I'm not sure what to do here. Any advice for how I can move forward? Update: that night I approached my wife and told her that I was going to find a therapist. I didn't connect it to her accusations or anything. Just said that I was having a tough time and needed therapy. She shrugged and told me to do whatever. Next day, I got home from work and our room and my home office were ripped apart. Things everywhere. Important papers scattered. I don't see her but our daughter's in her room crying. My wife left her alone. Her cell phone's off. I call my in-laws and a few friends, but no one's seen her. I'm starting to get worried and I call my mom to see if she can babysit while I go out and look for her. Before my mom can get home, my wife gets back. Jessie's driving. Jessie doesn't come in. She hasn't been back in the house since I kicked her out because she was offended by my behavior. But my wife does. She's clearly upset. Been crying. I ask what happened. I thought at first the house might have been robbed. She starts screaming at me that I'm being unfaithful and that the therapy is a front so I can meet my mistress. I try to calm her down and tell her that's not true, but she came at me and she whacked me. My nose is broken. She kind of realized what she did and sat down on the couch and went comatose. Just stared at the wall. I went into my daughter's room and locked the door, called my mom to tell her what happened. She was already on her way, and my mother-in-law to ask her to come over and take care of my wife. I packed a bag for my daughter and when my mom got there, we left. My wife didn't even look up. We dropped my daughter off with my dad and then went to urgent care for my nose. I got blood all over my mom's new Subaru. My daughter and I are staying with my parents for a while and my wife's staying with hers. I am looking into getting a restraining order against Jessie. My wife and I are separating. I love her but I won't live with someone who hurts me and who could potentially hurt our daughter. I am not going forward with a divorce yet, with the hopes that my wife will get the treatment she needs and we can work things out. My in-laws told me that they're looking at inpatient treatment at a local hospital, but I also have everything well documented in case of an eventual custody battle. My heart's broken because I know this isn't my wife, this is a sickness in her mind, but I need to keep myself and our daughter safe and give her the space to recover. I'm hoping that this is the right decision. Thanks again everyone. Update 2, do I let the woman I fought with my wife's death let her speak at her funeral? My wife passed on early Monday morning, convinced by her friend Jessie that I was having an affair that I did not have. She had a mental break, which resulted in my taking our infant daughter and staying with my parents for a while. She was with her parents, who planned on taking her to the hospital for inpatient treatment on Monday. On Sunday night she came to my parents' house and demanded I give her our daughter. Because she had left her alone for several hours the last time she was responsible for her and had gotten physical with me, I refused. I offered to let her come in and spend time with her while my parents and I were present, but she didn't want to come in and wanted to take our daughter with her. She was upset but left eventually. A few hours later, she drove her parents' car into a tree and passed away. The friend, Jessie, came to see my daughter and me yesterday. After some tears, she told me that she was planning to speak at my wife's funeral. She had already cleared it with my in-laws but was letting me know as a courtesy. I told her she would not be speaking at the funeral. We fought and she left after telling me that I was an asshole and not the only person who loved my wife. I talked to my in-laws who were adamant that Jessie be allowed to speak. She and my wife knew each other since they were kids and my in-laws are close to her. We're all very fragile right now and I fear that pushing this further would hurt my relationship with my in-laws, which I don't want. Still, the thought of seeing Jessie up there at my wife's funeral makes me feel sick. I don't think I can stand to listen to her, knowing that she took joy in my wife's deteriorating mental health and picked up my wife, leaving my daughter home alone. That being said, I don't trust myself to make the best decisions right now. My mind's clouded by grief, guilt, and fear. My parents are split on what to do and I don't have the energy to reach out to my friends, so I'm coming here again to ask for your advice. Thank you.
Next story.
I found my girlfriend's Reddit post and I am heartbroken and angry. I met my GF at work a couple of years ago. It was her first day at her new job after finishing school. We work in the building industry. She is 5 feet 3 inches, has long dark hair, intense green eyes, a beautiful face and an amazing strong body. She's gorgeous is what I'm trying to say. I was instantly smitten as were multiple of my coworkers. She gets hit on a lot at work by guys that don't know her / us, and I walk around with a smirk on my face when I observe this, because sorry guys, I have no idea what I've done to deserve her, but she loves me. Fortunately she is easygoing and doesn't have a hard time brushing it off. Anyways, we started talking about life and I found out she owns a house and she is a 4th degree black belt in Taekwondo. Dang, this girl is a badass. The only family she has left is her 81-year-old grandmother who lives with her. This spoke volumes to me. She is not only strong and responsible, she is also caring, loving and an amazing person. We had so much fun together while getting to know each other. I still remember how nervous I was about asking her out and how I was jumping from joy inside when she said yes. We took our time getting to know each other, but I started realizing that not everything was as perfect as it seemed in the beginning. She slowly started opening up about her past, how neglected she was as a child. Her father never wanted her and her mother and stepfather hated her. They beat her on a daily basis and tortured her regularly. She has several scars and burn marks on her body to this day. She was repeatedly locked in her bedroom for days, a few times for up to a week without food, water or access to a bathroom. She ran away from home many times even at a young age and got into trouble in so many ways. She started taking the bus on her own when she was 5 to her grandparents' house. It's a 5-hour drive. One time when she was 6, a bus driver wouldn't let her on the bus without her parents' consent, so she just wandered the streets until she fell asleep in a park. They never reported her missing and no one intervened. She has always done relatively well in school. This is just because she's smart as hell, and therefore the school never worried enough about her to intervene. She lost her V card when she was 12. He was the same age and was also a troubled kid. They grew up together and from my understanding they offered great support to each other. I don't blame them for going at it at this young age. Puberty is hard enough as it is. Imagine going through it with no support and guidance at all from the adults around you. I haven't gotten the whole story, but she was eventually forced to watch while a man unalived himself. He passed instantly. She was in a car accident a few years later that unalived her second boyfriend and almost unalived her. She had a lengthy recovery at a rehabilitation center out of town. Her mother didn't even visit her at the hospital or at the rehabilitation center. Because she was only 16, her grandfather had to take her back to her mother after. She wanted to stay with her grandparents, but her mother didn't allow it. I don't understand why. About 2 months ago I moved into her house. I was at her house 95% of the time anyways and it just felt right, so we went with it. Last week we were doing stuff around the house, settling in, but out of nowhere I came into the living room and found her sitting on the floor crying and I immediately saw the emotional pain she was in. I don't know how else to explain it. I had no idea what was going on or what to do, so I just let her cry it out while I held her. Eventually I looked around and there was a small open box with a lot of pictures in it. It looked old, so I realized she was crying about old trauma. I later, with her consent OFC, looked through the stack of pictures and for the first time I saw pictures of her at a young age. Adorable baby and childhood pictures of her and her friend who passed. Puppy love pictures from her preteen and teen years. She was just as beautiful back then as she is now. How could anyone hurt this tiny adorable baby and child? I don't get it. There is also a necklace in a Ziploc bag in the box. I saw it was broken but I really didn't pay it much more attention than that. Until I saw her post on Reddit today. I was scrolling on Reddit after work and somehow stumbled upon her post. She has a really hard time talking about her past, but her post defiantly included some therapy writing. As this rant is for me too. She explained the story behind the broken necklace and asked in the relationship advice subreddit if it is disrespectful to me if she keeps the pictures and the necklace. In between the lines I can sense some hesitation because of an a-hole, an ex that I didn't know about, who berated her for keeping the necklace and broke it many years ago. I am going to look into having it fixed tomorrow, but I don't know how realistic this is as it is broken pretty badly. I am heartbroken after reading her story. I am so angry. I am so frustrated. Why did no one help her out of her misery? How do people find it in themselves to hurt a child? Why do people feel threatened by dead people who when alive showed nothing but love? Why didn't I meet her many years ago so she wouldn't have to struggle as much for all these years? She was a baby. She was a child. Why? Just why? She is not home yet, but will be within a couple of hours. I have no idea what I'm going to say to her. But I know if I don't start crying again when she gives me her hello kiss like she always does, she will see that I have been crying like a baby for over an hour and either way I will have to explain myself. Wish me luck.
Next story.
Parents, when did you realize you had failed your children? From the day he was born, my son just came out wrong. We showered affection on him and really tried to give him a happy childhood. But from the day we brought him home from the hospital, he was miserable. He cried for 13 months straight. He cried until he had no voice left and kept crying. You could see his little face scrunched up and no sound coming out, totally hoarse. Once he got over the crying stage, we thought we were out of the woods. But it quickly became clear that he was just angry at being alive. I never saw the kid have a genuine, joyous smile once in the time I knew him. I saw him grin a vicious, horrible grin many times. He took a perverse pleasure from causing pain or suffering or breaking a rule, but a smile from real pleasure at something nice? No, never. Not once. He had no interest in anything positive. He was fueled by hate, and everything he did was bent toward that. As soon as he could walk, his mission in life was to destroy things. He would break or try to break anything that came in his range. When he grew older, he became more and more unmanageable. Therapy and meds were hopeless. He would bite, kick, scream, scratch and spit at anyone trying to do anything with him. He was kicked out of school twice before he was 9. The next school put him in a special class that kept him away from the other students. We had to install a door and lock on the kitchen because he would steal knives and use them to gouge the walls and furniture or chase people with them. When he was 10, he stabbed me with a kitchen knife in the hip and butt. I still have the scars. As he grew older, he grew darker. He moved into setting things on fire, and torturing local animals. There was a stray dog that hung out around the park near our house. My son blinded it in one eye with a barbecue fork. He would dip cats' tails in gasoline and light them on fire. He became a violent, stinking, vicious beast that lived in our house. When my son was 16, my wife got pregnant again. I can't tell you how different our reaction was. Instead of joy, we felt horror. My son had been such an unending nightmare for 16 years. We couldn't take the idea of starting again from the beginning. We talked a lot about terminating, but in the end, we decided that my wife would have the baby. If it turned out evil, we would put it up for adoption. We knew we just couldn't do it again with another child like our son. We had a daughter. She was normal. Suddenly we saw what our lives should have been like the whole time. How things would have been had our son not been himself. She laughed at things and was happy. After 4 months, she was sleeping through the night. I can't describe the relief and happiness that we both felt. Up until that time, whatever mistakes I made, I'd always tried to do the best for my son. I tried to love him and care for him, I really tried. But when my daughter was born, my wife and I both instinctively just turned toward her. She became our focus, not from malice, but just because she was so much easier. She was so happy and sweet. Every moment we were with her was like magic. I understand this was wrong, but we honestly couldn't help it. My son hadn't cared about my wife being pregnant. When we brought our daughter home, he started acting out even more. At this time he was 17, and we were having blowout screaming matches daily. Usually after we fought, he would storm out of the house and disappear for hours at a time, or come back the next morning. It was a relief. I started to actually look forward to our fights because it would get him away from us for a while. After the birth of our daughter, my relationship with my son was almost entirely gone. Our only real interactions were screaming at each other. My wife was even worse with him, she just had nothing left. By that time, if our son even came into the same room as her, she would just stop whatever she was doing and start screaming, "Get the hell away from me. Get away. Get the hell out." Until he left. He started spending more and more time out of the house, which was a blessing for us. I have no idea what he got up to out in the world, but we were just happy it wasn't being inflicted on us. Eventually, we replaced all of the cheap, thin interior doors in our home with thick, dense wood doors that couldn't be kicked through. They were equipped with keyed locks that my wife and I carried keys to. I know it sounds extreme, but locks and heavy doors were the best way we had found to create safe spaces from him. I was not locking my son in rooms like a prisoner. He had free reign of the house and could come and go as he pleased. My wife and I would lock ourselves in rooms to protect ourselves from him. If anything, we were the prisoners in our own home. On the day in question, I had fought with my son in the morning and he had left the house in a rage. My wife and I were enjoying some peace and quiet in the kitchen while our daughter napped in our bedroom. And then my daughter began crying. Any parent who has young children can tell you, you get used to your child's different cries. This cry was terror. The second we heard it, my wife and I were both out of our chairs and running to the room. My son was in the room. We lived in a bungalow, and the bastard had climbed in the window to get to her. He was standing over her crib with a steak knife in his hand. I have no idea where he got it, but it wasn't one of ours. He had broken her skin twice already. Once in the belly area and once on her arm. I could see blood running down. When I entered the room, he was dragging the back of the knife down her face, not cutting, but almost tickling her with it, teasing her while she screamed. He looked up at us and smiled. Before I knew what I was doing, I was instinctively moving, running to put myself between them. Even with that, my wife got there faster. It was like a movie on fast forward. She got to our son and bashed his hand away, knocking the knife across the room. She then shoved him with her whole body weight, so hard that he flew away from the crib and bounced off the wall. I picked up my daughter and held her while my wife screamed us. I could see her shaking, almost convulsing. My son's face as he stood there was blank and dead. There was nothing in his eyes. I watched my wife take a step toward him. She waited, looking at him for maybe 3 to 5 seconds without moving. And then she punched him in the face. Now until this point, you may have been picturing my wife as a typical woman. Small frame, dainty, delicate. This is not the case. My wife does have a small frame, but dainty and delicate she is not. Never has been since I've known her. Since her early teens, my wife has been a boxer. She was about 130 pounds, she carried a lot of muscle and she knew how to punch. I had 70 pounds on her back then. I have no doubt that in a real fight between me and her she could have and would have pounded me flat. Neither of us had ever laid a hand on our son in anger before, but something broke in her that day. All the years of anger and pain and sorrow and frustration just came pouring out. When she hit him, his head snapped back and blood started pouring out of his nose. He hardly reacted. He just looked at her with his shocked expression like he didn't know how to process what had just happened. She waited another second. And then she hit him again. I could have reached out and stopped her. I could have dragged her out of the room, taken her away, calmed her. I didn't. I just stood there and watched while she systematically started to pound him to a pulp. Every time he brought his hands to cover one part, she would blast him somewhere else. Body, head, over and over. He started screaming, crying out, and yelling for her to stop. It's the most genuine reaction I'd ever seen him have to anything in his whole life. But she wasn't stopping. I watched her ramping up, hitting harder, faster, working him like a heavy bag. He tried to swing at her and she slipped him easily. She was on autopilot, sinking down into her training. I stood there watching for a minute. Then I turned my back on them and took my daughter out of the room. I brought my daughter to the kitchen and gave her a bath in the sink. I found that he had cut her a third time on the sole of her foot. All the cuts were superficial. I cleaned her up and held her until she calmed. In our bedroom, I could hear my son screaming. I could hear him calling my wife horrible names, telling her he would cut her head off and violate her corpse. After a while, I didn't hear him cry or say anything anymore. He must have been knocked out, but I could still hear her beating him. That went on for a long time. I just sat at the kitchen table waiting for her to finish. Finally, she came out and sat down across from me. Her hands were swollen and red. Her face and arms were splattered with blood. Her chest was heaving. We just stared at each other without saying anything. After a while I asked her, "Is he dead?" She looked back at me and answered, "I sure hope so." I nodded. That was all there was to say about that. I understood how she felt perfectly. I felt the same. Eventually my wife started crying and went to take a shower. I just stayed where I was holding our daughter. After a long while, I heard moaning and sobbing coming from our room. It turned out that my son wasn't dead. I went in to see how bad it was. It was pretty bad. I've never seen a more merciless beating laid onto anyone, Before or since. He was lying on the floor, rolling around with blood leaking out of his face. His nose was squashed flat out across his face. Both of his eyes were completely swollen shut and starting to blacken already. I could see that a couple of his fingers were bent out at weird angles and he had pissed his pants. I think he must have been missing teeth, but I couldn't see any on the floor and I couldn't see inside his mouth. His lips were all puffed up and swollen. From talking to my wife about it later, I now know that she had systematically beaten every part of his body, focusing heavily on his legs. She told me she kicked him in the groin repeatedly until her legs got tired, and had kept beating his body long after he had passed out. When my wife came out of the shower, I still didn't know what to do about our son. I didn't know whether to call the police or an ambulance, or take him to the hospital myself. After a while I realized that I simply didn't care what happened to him anymore. We decided to just let him live or die on his own. There was an in-law suite in the basement that we had never really used. My wife, my daughter and I just moved down there. We simply ceded the top floor of the house to my son, locked everything down, and separated our lives entirely. Over the next week we could hear him moving around upstairs sometimes. I think he just spent most of time lying in bed recovering. I went to work, watching on high alert in case he attacked me in the driveway, but he never did. My wife stayed home with our daughter. She was never out of our sight. One night we heard him going ballistic, smashing things and banging. We didn't respond. He never tried to get downstairs or get near us though. I think he was afraid that if he got near us again, my wife might finish the job on him. After 3 weeks down in the basement, we hadn't heard anything from up above for a few days. I ventured upstairs to the main floor of the house. The place was demolished, and there was no sign of my son. He was gone. It took months to repair the damage he had done and get the main floor back to normal again. He had ripped the place apart. I feel thankful that he didn't burn the house down with us in it. I'm honestly not sure why he didn't. The kid wasn't shy about lighting things on fire. After that, I lived in fear every day that he would come back. That he would ambush us out of the blue and try to kill us. We moved houses about 3 years later. I finally stopped being afraid that he would show up again, as now he had no idea where we were. I finally felt safe from him. All this happened a long time ago. I'll be 70 this year and my wife passed from cancer in 2016. My daughter is 31 now. I moved in with her and her husband after my wife passed. I've got 2 granddaughters and they are the joy of my life. I see a therapist a couple times a month to talk about all this. I don't know where my son is. The last time I saw him was when he was lying on the floor of our bedroom, bleeding and smashed. I haven't heard from him since he left, more than 30 years now. I don't want to. I carry a lot of guilt from that time, and a lot of conflicted emotions. I didn't beat him myself, but I allowed him to be beaten, and I thought he deserved it. I was happy it happened. I didn't try to kill him, but I would have been happy if he died. I will say that I do hope he was able to overcome his demons and go live a normal life somewhere. If he wasn't able to do that, if he stayed the way he was, then I truly do hope someone out there killed him. When I knew him, he was a rabid dog, and whichever way it went I just hope he isn't still out there hurting anyone else.
Next story.
My boyfriend asked for a paternity test for our child. As soon as the results come and show he is the father, I'm leaving him. I'm a new mom to a baby boy who is my pride and joy, and though it's been a roller coaster adjusting to taking care of a baby, the past few months have been great, tiring but great. I have a boyfriend of 3 years who is the first person relationship-wise I have ever loved, and I thought we were doing great as new parents but also as partners. Friday, he came home and he asked me for a paternity test. Just like that, it was completely out of the blue. I was putting away the dishes and he asked for one, like he was asking what's for dinner. I'm a different race from him, but our child, apart from the skin tone, is literally his mirror image from pictures I had seen of him when he was a baby. I was stunned when he asked, and his reasons were that he had to be sure he was the father. He had to have that certainty. All I remember as he was speaking is just immediately feeling pain. The man I love doesn't trust me. He would actually believe that I would sleep with someone else, cheat on him, and then try to pass off another man's baby as his. I have never ever given him reason to think I would cheat on him. I have tried to be transparent and communicate, and it wasn't enough. He told me he would give me time to think about this, that he wouldn't go behind my back and do this test, but for our relationship to move forward, he needs to be 100% sure. He repeated this because he, in his words, needed me to realize how serious he was. After thinking for a couple of days, I'm going to allow him this paternity test because I have nothing to hide. I never cheated and would have never cheated on him. Once it's proven that he's the father, I'm ending it, leaving the same day, and I am going to try my best to be a cooperative co-parent with him. In the meantime, I'm coming up with my exit plan, a place to live, and a lawyer to work out a custody arrangement in court. I can't even tell my family or my friends right now because they would go nuclear, and my first priority is our child. I hope the test was worth it to him. I was so angry and planned to leave, but the anger was quickly replaced by hurt once I calmed down.
Update.
My boyfriend asked for a paternity test for our child. I realized if I blindsided him like that, I would be doing the exact same thing that he did to me when he asked for a paternity test. I planned to ask him to talk, but I also didn't want him to think I was trying to get out of the test. So beforehand, I booked an appointment at 2 different paternity test locations. I asked him to talk when he came home, and I made sure our child was at my mom's. I told him that whatever happened with this talk, the paternity test was the only thing. Paternity tests had been booked and would go forward. I basically asked him his reasoning and when he started having doubts about paternity. Was it a previous relationship? Did cheating happen? He said it was about a week before he asked me that he started having doubts. He said that he was on his lunch break one day just reading articles, and he clicked on an old article about a man who found out his 3 kids weren't his after, like 20 years. This led him into a rabbit hole of podcasters and YouTube videos that encouraged men to ask for paternity tests. While he thought those podcasters were idiots, he said that paternity was an exception. He said his reasoning was that some women have done this before and he wanted to be sure. He said, "You know, it's yours because the baby comes out of you. But how do I know? The test gives me that assurance." I was hurt by that, but I decided to explain how I felt. I said that for him. It was a rational request while for me, it was basically him saying that he didn't trust me. It was him saying that he believed I would cheat on him, get pregnant, have him emotionally, financially and physically support me during the pregnancy and birth and basically lie to him while he raised another man's child. I told him that I understand that women had done this before, but the fact that he thought I would do this to him is what bothered me. I told him the truth, that when I was angry, I had planned to leave and that I even went looking for a lawyer, a co-parenting plan, and a new place to live. He was stunned that I would leave for something so small. I found that to be a weird kind of irony, that he believed issuing an ultimatum about a paternity test and basically accusing your partner of cheating was something small. I told him I was really hurt by what he said, that I was still hurt but that if he needs this peace of mind, that we would do it. He asked what about our relationship and I told him, I didn't know. We did the test 2 days later and got the results back after 3 days. He opened both of them and to my surprise, he's not the dad.
Next story.
My cousin told me that she was sleeping with my boyfriend, who died last year while we were together. Almost a year ago, I lost the man I considered the love of my life. We were together since I was 19. He died in an accident, and it was so unexpected. It was tragic, and I went into depression. He was the man I wanted to call my husband and have a family with. There were so many things we wanted to experience together. I just couldn't deal with it, and the pain was very strong. Thankfully, I had a few people who were there for me. I also went to therapy, and it really helped me. It still hurts a lot, but I'm doing my best to get better. The thing is that I have this cousin who I see from time to time but don't really get along with. She only contacts me when she needs me to help her. She used to have a lot of issues and trouble, so I used to feel a bit bad about her and try to help her a bit. 2 days ago, she called me because she wanted to know if I could take care of her kids. She's a single mother of 2, for a few hours. I told her that I couldn't because I had to study for an exam. She started to get mad, go on a rant, and told me that I was being a bitch, lying, and said other hurtful things. I told her I was done with her and her insults. I was about to hang up, but that's when she told me, just so you know, I was sleeping with my late boyfriend's name for 3 months, and that was until the day he died. I just couldn't believe it. I was in disbelief, completely shocked, but I didn't know if it was true or not. I told her to shut up, that it was all lies, that she needed to take her medication, and hung up on her. I started to cry. I was in shock, and I wasn't ready for it. I know she has some bipolar issues, but I also know for sure she slept with plenty of married and taken men in the past. I'm so confused. I just have a hard time believing my boyfriend would have been able to do that. He didn't even like her, and she didn't like him either. I don't think she was his type, and he told me she was bringing too much drama. If it's true, I never saw or noticed anything. I can't believe it, but it put some doubts in my mind. I'm feeling lost and confused now. Is she lying? Did she invent this because she wanted to be mean and hurt me? I just don't know what to think.
Next story.
Found my girlfriend was cheating on me with a close friend, so you won't believe the terrible things I do to them. Part 1. My wife Rachel and I grew up in a largish town of close to 30,000 people. We knew each other at an early age, roughly 6 or 7, can't specifically remember. We were practically inseparable. At 16, we started dating each other. When we turned 18, we moved away for work in a city just a few hours drive away. By 20, we were married and had bought our first house. At 22, we discovered that she was pregnant with a boy. It was then disaster struck about 5 weeks before she was due to go on maternity leave. A large shelving unit collapsed and crushed her. I was told that both her and our child were unalived instantly. 2 of her colleagues had also been injured in the accident, one left paralyzed, the other losing his leg after it had to be amputated. The company she was working for had, in a cost-cutting measure, decided to continue using old shelving that had been written off as unsafe instead of replacing it. I still haven't quite forgiven those executives and management personnel that made that decision, because they cut short the love of my life as well as unaliving her unborn child. It wasn't long after I was told I had a choice on how to proceed with what her company called compensation, but I called it blood money. They wanted to settle out of court to avoid a lawsuit. I, on the other hand, was out for their blood. Just to clarify here, this is not the revenge, this is still backstory. Fortunately, due to the coverage that it got, and involving several politicians, the case was settled quickly in court, roughly 3 years, in which the payout for all parties was close to 10 times the amount that they had initially offered. A lot of fines were given to them for breaches on work, health and safety, executives were sacked, others were jailed, etc. In this time, I was still working my job in telecommunications. My mother, bless her soul, had moved in while all this was happening to help me. I think I would have fallen apart if she hadn't been as involved as she was. It was around this time, I was offered a promotion, but it involved a lot of travel around the state. I made a request to have an office in my hometown's branch, as I wanted to not only take care of businesses in the state, but in my hometown also, as there was no business representative located there, to which they agreed. After a few months, we settled into a routine of 1 to 2 weeks in the city office, 1 week in my hometown and 1 to 2 weeks visiting the rest of the state. After a year, I decided to buy a house in my hometown, so I wasn't having to stay at my parents' place every week or so that I was home and that I could come and go as I pleased. This is important for later in the story. It is about 4 years later that our story begins. I had just returned from one of my trips on Friday, and was checking in some stuff at my office when Harry, the branch's managing director, walked in. We had grown up together also, but had gone to different schools, but since coming back had developed a very close friendship. He asked how things were, and then asked me if I wanted to come to a house party that he was having that evening. Short notice and all, but I said yes. I felt like a few drinks with friends were in order. It was there that Harry introduced me to Catherine. She was a new hire at the branch where my hometown's office was located and was getting to know everyone being new in town. We hit it off immediately. As much of a cliche as it sounds, it was almost as if Rachel was in front of me, instead of Catherine. I won't bore you too much with the details, but after 2 years of dating, we decided to take the next step and she moved into my hometown's house. Everything up to this point had been going really well. Catherine and my parents got along and Rachel's parents also approved and were happy that someone could make me just as happy as Rachel had done. All was going well for close to a year when things began to change. Skype sessions were cut short suddenly. Neighbors would tell me about how a car, described to me like it was Harry's, was always seen parked in the back alley near my house whenever I was away. Some clothes that weren't mine were in my wardrobe. All signs pointed to her cheating, but she said that nothing was happening. She said that Harry would come over occasionally to discuss business, etc., but never stayed the night. I chalked it up to me being paranoid and continued on as if nothing was wrong, but there was always this feeling that something wasn't right. It was close to 6 months after that I discovered that she had been lying to me. I had just finished closing a rather large contract with a new company and negotiations had wrapped up earlier than I had anticipated. So instead of sticking around for the next few days, I decided to pay for an early flight home and surprise everyone. Fast forward a few hours and I drive into my hometown and down the alley behind my house so that I could get into the house without being seen and surprise Catherine. Some part of me was curious, however, as to whether this mystery car was there. Sure enough, there was a car that was blocking the back entrance gate. I was confused for a moment, wondering if it had just been a neglectful neighbor parking, only to realize that it was indeed Harry's car. If it hadn't been for the high hedge line that I had put in a few years back for privacy, I may have well driven past my own place. Pulling up behind his car, I got out and thought it was strange that he was there so late, as she claimed that he always had left by now. As I approached the back of the house, I saw something that stomach drop. In my kitchen, Catherine and Harry were going at it hammer and tong. I froze. Time stopped. There was my close friend, having intimacy on my kitchen bench with my girlfriend. I didn't know what to do. So many questions were running through my head. Was this real or was I dreaming? Why were they having intimacy in my house? Feeling defeated, I turned and left without them seeing me. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity. I was crying hard, but the sadness quickly turned into anger. The same kind of anger I felt towards those that were responsible for Rachel's death. I wanted to hurt them badly. As a pacifist, I don't believe in violence. It was then I knew I was going to punish them and destroy their lives. And what better time to start than now? I moved my car back up the alley, far enough away from my driveway that I could still see Harry's car, and then walked back to the gate where I could see into the house, and called her phone. They were still going for it when it rang. They both looked at the caller ID and did a double take when my name came up. I could see that she was considering answering it and they let it ring out. After a few moments they were back into it again and I dialed once again. This time she did answered. As she was answering I hung up and made my way back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back. She asked why I was calling as late as I was, and I told her that I was about 10 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her coming in. She, obviously, was shocked and acted happy that I was coming, and the call ended very quickly after she said she was going to get up and get changed into something. I said bye and hung up. A few moments later, Harry came peeling through the gate and still half naked, jumped into his car, took off like a bat out of hell. I smiled a little, knowing the fear that both of them would be feeling from being so close to being caught. I waited a few moments before turning my car into the same place Harry had been moments earlier. The night was fairly uneventful afterwards, and it wasn't until after she was asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. I couldn't sleep. I needed to plan, and plan I did. The revenge my mother always taught me to be a pacifist and to allow cosmic karma to take its course. But on this occasion, I decided that karma could use a helping hand. I decided to punish them separately but destroy both of them. I knew that Harry had a substance habit. Nothing major, but he kept it very private. I only knew about it accidentally after seeing some stuff left out in his place, but pretended I hadn't seen it when he had made attempts to cover it up. I began calling some of my more unsavory clientele and made a few discreet inquiries into obtaining some samples that they were willing to part with. A few days later, I had a decent enough stash for my plan to work. About a month later, I had friends, including Harry, around for a barbecue night. After making sure that I sufficiently liquored up Harry, I told him to stay the night and sleep it off. In the early hours of that morning, I took the substances, and an assortment of my personal belongings, and placed them at various places around his car, with the biggest stash in his tire well. Confident that he wouldn't find them over the few months as the rest of my plan took effect, I locked the car up and went inside to sleep. I also placed some more substances and personal items in his house after driving him home because he was still too intoxicated to drive. A few days later, I staged a break-in, by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen and leaving it open before heading back to the city for a flight. I had several messages the moment I landed. One from my clearly panicked mom, who had found the back door smashed open and had called the police, one from Catherine in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call. After returning all the calls, I informed the police I was away on business, and that I would be back the following week to talk with them. While away, I got Catherine to stay with my parents until after I got back, and asked my dad to organize one of the local security companies to install cameras and an alarm system after getting the go-ahead from the police as to not ruin the scene of the crime. After getting home, I did the usual "my God, I can't believe this has happened and why would anyone do this?" routine. After doing a thorough check of everywhere, finding that the items I had taken were missing and filing a police report, I had the security company's rep talk Catherine and I through how the cameras and alarm system worked.
Update.
I moved my car back up the alley, far enough away from my driveway that I could still see Harry's car, and then walked back to the gate where I could see into the house, and called her phone. They were still going for it when it rang. They both looked at the caller ID and did a double take when my name came up. I could see that she was considering answering it and they let it ring out. After a few moments they were back into it again and I dialed once again. This time she did answered. As she was answering I hung up and made my way back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back. She asked why I was calling as late as I was, and I told her that I was about 10 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her coming in. She, obviously, was shocked and acted happy that I was coming, and the call ended very quickly after she said she was going to get up and get changed into something. I said bye and hung up. A few moments later, Harry came peeling through the gate and still half naked, jumped into his car, took off like a bat out of hell. I smiled a little, knowing the fear that both of them would be feeling from being so close to being caught. I waited a few moments before turning my car into the same place Harry had been moments earlier. The night was fairly uneventful afterwards, and it wasn't until after she was asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. I couldn't sleep. I needed to plan, and plan I did. The revenge my mother always taught me to be a pacifist and to allow cosmic karma to take its course. But on this occasion, I decided that karma could use a helping hand. I decided to punish them separately but destroy both of them. I knew that Harry had a drug habit. Nothing major, but he kept it very private. I only knew about it accidentally after seeing some Coca-Cola and Zaza left out in his place, but pretended I hadn't seen it when he had made attempts to cover it up. I began calling some of my more unsavory clientele and made a few discreet inquiries into obtaining some samples that they were willing to part with. A few days later, I had a decent enough stash for my plan to work. About a month later, I had friends, including Harry, around for a barbecue night. After making sure that I sufficiently liquored up Harry, I told him to stay the night and sleep it off. In the early hours of that morning, I took the substance, and an assortment of my personal belongings, and placed them at various places around his car, with the biggest stash in his tire well. Confident that he wouldn't find them over the few months as the rest of my plan took effect, I locked the car up and went inside to sleep. I also placed some more substance and personal items in his house after driving him home because he was still too drunk to drive. A few days later, I staged a break-in, by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen and leaving it open before heading back to the city for a flight. I had several messages the moment I landed. One from my clearly panicked mom, who had found the back door smashed open and had called the police, one from Catherine in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call. After returning all the calls, I informed the police I was away on business, and that I would be back the following week to talk with them. While away, I got Catherine to stay with my parents until after I got back, and asked my dad to organize one of the local security companies to install cameras and an alarm system after getting the go-ahead from the police as to not ruin the scene of the crime. After getting home, I did the usual "my God, I can't believe this has happened and why would anyone do this?" routine. After doing a thorough check of everywhere, finding that the items I had taken were missing and filing a police report, I had the security company's rep talk Catherine and I through how the cameras and alarm system worked. Then came the question I had been waiting for, the question of what happens if we are doing some business and don't want it recorded. She acted a bit shy asking this question, but I knew exactly the reason she was asking. He assured us that this was a question he got asked a lot, and we were shown on the home computer, if we wanted to be doing things without it being recorded, how to stop the recording for certain cameras, so that we could protect her modesty. As I was walking him out, I asked him if cameras were turned off, could a notification be sent out, just as a security precaution. He came back in and helped me through how to set up email notifications and left shortly after. Fantastic. All I had to do was wait. At this stage, I approached our/legal advice for some help in relation to couples law in my country. I needed to make sure that my upcoming plan could legally be done and that I would not be forced to pay out any money or equity to Catherine, as I didn't know if we were classified as a de facto couple or not. Being the sole benefactor of Rachel's estate, I didn't want to be left with any nasty surprises where Catherine could take any of the estate away from me. Shout out to those guys and gals there as they helped me get in contact with a great lawyer who assured me, due to the fact that although we had been dating for close to 4 years, we had not been living together long enough to be classified as de facto, and because I was paying all the utilities on the property that she was living in and didn't pay rent, showed that she had no legal standing to make a financial claim against me. Just to be sure though, he drew up what I felt was a pretty ironclad document just in case there was any legal trouble. The following week, my work had approached me, and offered me a promotion to move back to the city and run the team that I was a part of, meaning I wouldn't need to travel as often and be in the one location, and due to the success of being located in my hometown, that they were considering having 3 to 5 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in the larger surrounding towns, including my hometown, as a part of my team. I said yes, and began the process of beginning my transfer, which would take about 6 weeks. Perfect. More than enough time to gather all my evidence. Upon getting back to my hometown the following week, I began to start in motion the rest of my plan. I asked Harry to approve 1 week's worth of vacation for Catherine for 2 weeks' time. I wanted to send her and a friend or two away on a retreat before I made the biggest decision of my life for a second time. He jumped up and gave me a huge hug, congratulating me on being prepared to take the leap again. I hugged him back tight, but not the way I think he imagined it at the time. He agreed and blocked out the week for me. I asked him not to say anything to anyone, as I wanted to make it as big a surprise as I could. I knew that it would spread like wildfire around the office regardless, but that was my plan.
Update.
I told Catherine that I had booked her and 2 friends to go to a tropical spa resort, all expenses paid for a week. No questions asked, pick 2 friends, and come back to the biggest surprise of her life. She screamed like a kid who had just been told that all the candy in the shop was hers to have. I then told her that the following week, I was going to spend it in the city, preparing for a large client who was one of my biggest accounts, and needed some people in my team to help before flying out the following week, and I wouldn't be home until the Monday that she was leaving, so I wouldn't be able to see her, which seemed to disappoint her, but I told her it would be worth it when she returned. What I failed to tell her was that I had decided to take 2 weeks vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the shitstorm that was about to erupt the moment she stepped foot on the plane, as well as enjoying my first stage of freedom. On Sunday 2 weeks later, I flew back and began driving home. Once getting there, I'd done a quick pass by my house, and sure enough, Harry's car was there. Like the first night I had caught them, I parked a little ways back, and checked the cameras. Asleep, in my bed. No surprise honestly, as I had recorded them constantly do this over the 2 weeks I had been away. I then made my first call to the police, blocking my caller ID. I told them that I was one of my neighbors and saw someone hanging around in their car in the alley behind my house and occasionally passing something through windows to passing cars while also looking into my yard, and I was concerned that they were dealing substance and are going to break into someone's property. I gave them his license plate and description. They said they would have someone there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. I then called Catherine and told her I was about 10 minutes from home, and that I knew she was flying out tomorrow, but desperately wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the footage now, I laugh at the commotion that I am surprised I didn't hear. In a few short seconds, Harry was half dressed and flying out the back door to his car. At that point, I couldn't have asked for a more perfect scene. As Harry was peeling away, one of the police cars rounded the corner behind me, saw Harry driving away fast, and gave chase. After pulling in, greeting an excited Catherine, and doing all the couple things, she fell asleep again. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep a wink. The next day, her and her friends were bundled into a car. After they drove away, I had to wait a few hours, but I began to execute my plan. I called my friend who was a removalist, and apologized for the late notice but needed my place packed and moved on Friday. After agreeing on a time, I told him that he would need to take certain boxes to a storage facility, which he said wasn't an issue. Then I began packing Catherine's belongings. Later that day, I got a call from the police for me to come and identify some property that they had apprehended from a suspect the previous night that fit the description of property I had reported stolen. I grinned to myself, happy that my plan for Harry had grown to fruition, and replied that I would be there shortly to collect it. Of course, when I got there, some of the items were still unaccounted for, due to the fact that they must have still been in his house and they hadn't searched there yet. By this stage, the town was buzzing with news. Events in my hometown don't stay secret for long. Harry was disgraced and promptly fired for his possession of substance and stolen property, and our respective bosses on behalf of the company had extended a formal apology towards me during the week. That night I went to my parents' house and told both mine and Rachel's parents what had happened, omitting certain details, and that I was moving back to the city after being promoted, but Catherine wouldn't be a part of it. They were pretty upset initially that I hadn't let them know what was going on, but were happy that I was handling everything maturely and hadn't sunk to their level, thought they didn't agree with ghosting Catherine. But after some drinks, laughs and tears, I went home. On Friday afternoon, after a busy week of organizing cleaners for the following week, the real estate to put my house on the rental market, and various other tasks at my hometown's office, I packed some things into my car, and drove to my parents' place and said goodbye before the drive. Before leaving, I went to Becky's house. Becky had been one of Rachel's closest friends growing up. She was the only other person who knew what was happening, minus the details about Harry. Without her help, I wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly as I had. I gave Becky a large manila folder with my gathered evidence of her cheating, as well as the letter and a few other legal documents from my attorney stating that she was ordered not to contact me, and the details of how to access her belongings located at the storage unit I had rented out. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voice messages and text messages. Turns out, Catherine had come home early after being alerted to something being afoot in town, only to find an empty house and a for rent sign out the front. Freaking out, she had gone to my parents, who closed the door on her the moment that they answered, forcing her to call everyone until she managed to somehow be contacted by Becky and told that she had a package for her. I was told that she didn't take too well to that, as I fully well knew at that point from the numerous angry texts and voice messages from her accusing me of setting up Harry, of being deceitful, etc. I was worried that she might show up at my front door, but nothing ever happened.
Update. Final update.
Found my girlfriend cheating on me with my close friend. I have him arrested, and ghosted her. Part 8. So one of the questions I keep getting asked is what happened to Harry? Why I was so hard coming down on him and why I would incriminate myself, especially on the internet. After making some inquiries back home to some friends, the short answer is, Harry is looking at a few months in prison, as it's his first offense, but could be out sooner. And I felt that it was necessary to the story. No one other than myself knew what I had planned to do with Harry, which is why I omitted quite a few crucial details that had the potential to truly identify me, as well as change up some of the descriptive language about locations to potentially put this story anywhere in the world. Just for clarification, there was already more than enough evidence in his own home. I just provided the means for the police to further investigate his activity in his home. That being said, I don't regret doing what I did to him, as he knew both Rachel and I growing up, and knew how hard it was for me to pick up my life after she died. People have questioned the legality of what I did to her, moving all her stuff out, sending her and some friends away, spending a good amount on the trip, etc. Morally, I can see that it's a pretty dick move to build up her expectations of what she thought was going to happen. This, combined with killing her status around town, was my ultimate goal. To have her experience what it was like to have everything fall around you, but, from a legal standpoint, I had every right. In the time she had been living with me, she had never updated any of her personal information, driver's license, voting registration, etc. to reflect that she had moved into my house. I found out this information during the course of my preparation with my lawyer after I spoke to, with no concrete proof on paper to show that she was residing there, and because we hadn't met the de facto status, I was able to do what I did with no threat of backlash. As for Catherine, people have questioned why I didn't do more to her, or why I stuck around for as long as I did. Honestly, I almost did kick her out after a few days, but I wanted to gather evidence and show proof of her cheating so that everyone she knew would know what she had done. She is a major socialite, her words, and I knew by exposing her it would kill her reputation. As for what happened to her, I have been told that she moved to another state just recently after being transferred from the people I have spoken to today. She was put mainly on administrative duties before her transfer, as there was quite a bit of backlash after the rumor mill made its way around town.
Next story.
My aunt took my virginity, then I ruined her life. I am a 39 years old guy. When I was 17, I went to live with my dad. Him and my stepmother were also letting my stepmom's 38 years old sister live there too. She had her own room and so did I. I was an evil child with behavioral problems due to massive traumas when I was young. My sister was murdered, my parents divorced, and an earthquake destroyed my home in a 3-month period. I was constantly in therapy throughout my childhood. So my 17 years old brain decided I needed to lose my virginity. My plan was to seduce my quiet and shy step-aunt. I started by letting her catch me while I was pleasuring myself. Then I would constantly bring up intimate themes when we were alone and slowly chipped away at her resolve. It took a few weeks, but finally one weekend my dad and stepmom went away for the weekend, leaving my aunt and I alone. We finally did it. It was glorious. Felt better than anything ever before. We bought a baby monitor and put it in the garage so we wouldn't get caught. We would hear the sound of the garage door long before they would walk in. This lasted about 6 months before I got kicked out and went back to my mom's house. My aunt ended up getting a new boyfriend, and me being the little poop that I was, I told my mom what had happened one night when I was mad. Not much happened though. My step-aunt was mostly just shunned after that by the family. For years after that I felt guilty about what I did. Everyone told me it was her fault for not being an adult. But I don't believe that. I don't feel like a victim, I feel like I was the bad guy. She helped me and taught me things I have used since, and I betrayed her and ruined her life. The flip side of this story is it almost happened to me 20 years later when I was 37. My cousin's daughter was involved in a school shooting when she was 17. She rendered first aid to one of the victims. She was very closed off after that, but she did come to the family reunion. While at the reunion, she would only talk to me since I am a combat veteran, so apparently I know about trauma and stuff. I told her she could talk to me about anything anytime. Like a good family member does, right? A few months later she messages me on FB Messenger. Things start off innocently enough. She talked about the shooting in school and friends, but soon it veered into uncomfortable territory. She began making overt intimate references and innuendo. She would show me messages of her talking to pervs on the internet. The messages were extremely graphic. I tried to tell her to stop repeatedly, but she kept sending me dirty messages. I kinda freaked out a bit because I didn't want the stigma of being a PR dater. My family would never believe me if she accused me of something. So I showed my girlfriend the messages at the time, and she suggested I screenshot the messages and then block her. I reluctantly did. She made a burner account and threatened to unalive herself if I didn't talk to her. Then she threatened to say I was a PR dater to our family. I didn't cave, I just took more screenshots, blocked her new accounts and kept my girlfriend in the loop. Eventually the messages stopped and she ended up pregnant with an unknown man's baby a few months later. I feel I really dodged a bullet. But my point is, at no point did I feel tempted to do what my aunt had done 20 years before. I was just trying to help her, but I realized later that I was just putting myself in a vulnerable position. I learned from that, and I am now very careful who I correspond with online. So Reddit, was I roped or taken advantage of? Or was I lucky to learn from an experienced partner? Did I make the right choice with my cousin's daughter? Should I have never offered to talk to her online?
Next story.
I cheated on my fiancé with his brother and I realized I want to cancel the wedding. So I cheated on my fiancé Hugo with his older brother Michael and I realized that I've lost feelings for Hugo for a long time, and don't want to marry him, but have feelings for Michael. Cheating on Hugo was the last bit it took me to realize this. Little backstory how we met. I met Hugo and his brother in middle school. I was 13. I got to know Michael beforehand and got along with him much better. He was 16, and flirted with me a lot, but I told him he was too old for me. He was very sad about it, but he said that if I later married his brother, I would still be part of the family. Hugo and Michael both gave me their number. They left it up to me to decide which of them I wanted to get to know better. I chose Hugo because we didn't have such a huge age difference as Michael and I did, although I actually wanted to write Michael. So Hugo and I got to know each other better, met more often, and got together when I was 15 and he was 16. We were in a relationship for years, but my heart was with Michael the whole time. I put it off because I didn't want to hurt Hugo. He really does everything for me, and I can feel how much he loves me. I've met Michael from time to time when I was at Hugo's house or at family gatherings, and it gave me the impression that he wanted me as much as I wanted him. Of course, that wasn't good at all, and I'm aware of that. I went on living like this for years, and when Hugo proposed to me in September last year, I was so relieved. I thought that now I would only love Hugo and forget about Michael, or that he wasn't as present to me anymore. Wrong. Hugo and Michael's aunt got married for the third time last week and the whole family was there, including Michael. And there it happened. Hugo talked to his family members all evening and I was kind of alone. But that was okay with me, because I already knew everyone well, and at that point had quite a headache from the loud music. So I distanced myself from the revelers and, of course, met Michael. He wanted to keep me company and I agreed. We talked and eventually one thing led to another, and we went to the toilets together. By the way, we were both still sober when I cheated, so we really wanted it. Writing this, I realize how messed up everything is. After Michael and I made love, we were both very shocked at first. I meant that it was not a mistake but exactly what I wanted for years. Him. Michael confessed his love to me and told how frustrating it was for him over the years with the thought of his brother sleeping with his love. Michael and I want to be together and finally happy after all these years. I haven't told Hugo anything about my infidelity yet. Neither does Michael. Michael and I are now considering canceling the wedding and gently telling Hugo. I don't want to leave him standing in front of the altar and saying no, not in front of the whole family. I would like to spare him this experience. It's bad enough that I cheated on him with his brother. I've finally realized that I haven't had any feelings for Hugo for a long time. I don't want to go on with my life like this anymore. It's not fair to Hugo either. So my question now is, how can Michael and I tell Hugo? How do I tell Hugo that I love Michael? What are Michael and I supposed to do? And what are we going to do about the wedding now? I don't want to marry Hugo. Can the wedding take place and instead I marry Michael? Would something like that work? I'm pretty desperate right now because I finally want to be with Michael, but I don't want to cheat on Hugo again. Update, 4 months later, I married the brother, Michael, of my fiancé Hugo, last month. A few months ago I also did a post on another sub, about the wedding that was supposed to be in December and asked for help and advice. I decided to get into a relationship with Michael, even though I was still with Hugo. After a month and a few weeks of secretly dating, we decided to tell Hugo together. Since I live with Hugo, we invited Michael to our house. We explained to him that we were together and talked about our feelings that we have for each other. I confessed to him how long I had loved Michael and told him that I cheated on him with his brother at his aunt's wedding and that we made love. I also found out I'm pregnant from Michael, with twins, and we told Hugo that too. I got pregnant at his aunt's wedding, when I cheated. We obviously didn't use protection, as it was very spontaneous. Hugo reacted terribly. He was disappointed and hurt and kicked me out. Hugo told me to pack my things and never come back. He yelled at Michael and didn't give me another look. When I left with Michael, he threw his engagement ring at me. I haven't seen him since then. I now live with Michael, but I know from his mother that Hugo got severe depression and developed a drinking problem. He quit his job and is even having SI. I'm so sorry. I never wanted him to go through something like this. I feel infinitely guilty, because his complete mental state/situation is my fault. Michael says I should stop overthinking it, but I feel bad. Michael and I decided that we had suppressed our love long enough, and couldn't live it out, and we got married on the day that was actually Hugo's and my wedding day. We uninvited Hugo's friends and colleagues, and invited some of Michael's friends to the wedding. I also told my bridesmaids just before the wedding, that I was going to marry Michael, and 2 of my 5 bridesmaids didn't show up for the wedding. That annoyed me, but my wedding was still my absolute dream wedding. The food, especially the cake, the location, my dress, everything. We didn't tell our guests, 125 in total, other than the bridesmaids, that I was marrying Michael instead of Hugo, and most were very surprised/shocked, but still celebrated our wedding with Michael and me. However, the wedding gifts were a little problematic. A third of the guests made personalized gifts with pictures of Hugo and me, or our names on them. Michael and I did not accept these. We told the guests to give them to Hugo, as a gift, and as a memory. Michael and I also sent Hugo an invitation to the wedding, as I would have loved it if Hugo had been there on such an important day in my life. And because he's still one of the most important people in my life, plus he's Michael's brother. He didn't come to the wedding. Michael also suggested that Hugo could be our children's godfather, since he is Michael's brother. I'm not sure about that though, as I think it might be too painful for Hugo, but Michael doesn't think I should worry about it. What do y'all think? What should I do? I don't think that would be a good idea. I'm not sure and I don't want to burden Hugo unnecessarily, but I think it would be nice if the twins had another person to relate to. Only comment from OP. I don't regret the marriage or my pregnancy. How could I? My children are already incredibly loved by Michael and I. I am happy that me and my husband got married. What I regret is that I hurt Hugo so much. He didn't deserve that. I'm sorry that he's feeling this way now, and that he's going through a very difficult time, which is my fault. That's why I feel guilty, and the thing that I regret. He's still very important to me. I loved him for years. I haven't had any feelings for him since a long time now, but I still care about him and his well-being. I've made some mistakes during our relationship, I'll admit that, but I don't regret the time with him. These are beautiful memories for me, and hope he has time to heal. I wish Hugo only the best for himself, his mental health and his future. Am I the a-hole for trying to get back into my kids' lives? I, 28F, have 3 kids with my ex, 30M. We were never married, but we dated while I was in college. My senior year, I got pregnant and had twins, both boys. He moved me in with him and we were raising our kids together. 14 months after giving birth to the boys, I had a girl. Immediately after I had postpartum depression. I wasn't doing well and I decided to go back home to my parents to try to clear my head. Once home, I saw my old bedroom, my old things, and was kind of reminded of what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to take a gap year to travel, but I had gotten a scholarship to my first choice school and it seemed silly to pass it up. I decided then, this is what I needed to get in the right mental state. I called baby daddy and told him I'm going to Europe for a couple of months. He was incensed and tried to talk me out of it. I explained this is what I needed to go back to being myself and be a better parent and partner. So I went. He called me the first couple of months and kept asking if I was coming back. Eventually he stopped calling. About 6 months in, my parents told me that he had filed to get full custody of the kids. I was mad he didn't tell me before doing it, but I thought I'd at least take full advantage and really see the world and get it out of my system. I traveled for a little over 2 years and visited every continent. When I was done, I really wanted to see my kids, but I felt guilty for not being present in their lives and I didn't want to face my ex. One of the friends I made in my travels offered me a gig as an English teacher in a private school in Thailand. I took the opportunity and spent the next 3 years doing that. This year, I returned stateside and stayed with my parents. They showed me pictures of the kids and told me, my ex let them see the kids a couple of times. I got in touch with him, telling him I was ready to be involved in their lives and he flat out refused. I threatened to sue for custody and he just replied good luck with that and sent my pictures of me partying in Europe. They are not flattering. My parents want to see their grandkids more, but they tell me it's all my fault for not being able to see them. Am I the a-hole for trying to see them?
Update.
Reddit, it's my time to shine. Had to make a brand new account to not to reveal anything personal. I know exactly who this is. I know the kids and the dad. Those kids were raised by a wolf pack. When this pathetic waste of oxygen abandoned her kids, basically anyone and everyone who had a passing relation to the dad stepped up. His mom moved in for the first year to help with the babies. Neighbors, friends and relatives all donated or bought kids stuff for them. Clothes, diapers, toys, anything he needed. One of his friends manages a restaurant and he brought them unused food almost every night. I work at a bank, so I had nothing useful to contribute other than money and time. One of our buddies runs an MMA gym, and he has a kids class that starts after school, so he take them in after school until their dad gets off work. Whenever the kids need a babysitter, 2 or 3 rowdy men show up ready to be horsies or punching bags for the boys and tea party guests for the little girl. One of our other friends is a lawyer. He helped him gaining custody and advised him through the process. Op's parents are rich and they always offer money to help. On the advice of our lawyer friend he always refuses. That way they can't use that in any future custody battle. He didn't even let them introduce themselves as their grandparents, so they can't claim a relationship. Their dad is doing well now. Those kids don't want for anything. Every Sunday night, he hosts us to watch football and hang out with the kids. His daughter delights in serving everyone wheat juice. They're so much better off without this witch. Am I the a-hole for helping my brother run away from his wedding? I have 2 older brothers, this is about the middle one. Our parents divorced when I was very young due to our mother's insane jealousy. At first my dad was able to handle it, but when she started making comments about me wanting to be like his wife, he had enough. She quickly rebounded with a guy with 2 kids and had shared custody for a while. But when my dad got remarried, she went crazy, calling his new wife every horrible name and claiming he was cheating on her while they were married. I was always closer to my brothers and dad than my mom because she was always very mean to me. Long story short, my stepmom died in a bad car accident and my dad called her in the middle of the night letting her know he would pick us up earlier so we could attend the funeral, and she decided to take us on a fun trip to celebrate something. It was the happiest we've ever seen her, and when we realized what happened and started crying, she told us only worthless people cry for oars. Needless to say, things went nuclear and my dad asked for full custody with visitation for her. He always left the line of communication open and paid for us to visit her when she moved away, but it was still very bad, and as soon as we turned 18 we started to lower contact with her. Last time we saw her was on my HS graduation, where she made a point of letting everyone who would hear we were ungrateful kids, and her HB would call us bad names too. Been NC since then. My brother Sam started dating his ex 3 years ago. She has heard all the stories and the reasons we are NC, but she believes we are just dramatic. They had many issues due to her opinions, but she eventually seemed to drop the "you need to reconcile with your mother" crusade. During the wedding planning there was no indication of things going wrong or fishy. Then we got to the church and lo and behold, Mom, HB and 2 kids were sitting at front. I immediately panicked and called my brothers. Sam thought maybe somehow she found out and wanted to crash, so he called his ex to let her know of the potential drama, but she told him it was fine since she invited them. Sam hung up and asked me to go get him while oldest brother dealt with things at the church. We went home and barricaded ourselves there even when his ex, her family, friends, etc. came to try and make sense with him. Mom's HB even called and said he always knew we were worthless. Now that the dust has settled, most of Sam's friends are on his side, and so is most of our family. Dad's ex's parents already threatened to sue for the money they paid if he doesn't marry her, but Sam says he rathers pay them back for their contribution than marry someone that betrayed him. My nuclear family 100% supports Sam, but the backlash has been huge. Edit, you guys just reassured us all. Thank you. Some have commented about it, but no, she has not apologized. She even went so far as to text my oldest brother Joe that she thought it would be a good wedding present from my brother to her since she values family. My dad bought them a house as a wedding present, but only Sam is on the deed. She did have keys for when they moved there, but they just had the locks changed today, and Joe and some cousins are taking everything Sam owns from her flat during this week. We aren't worried about being sued, but we'll consult a lawyer just in case. We also heard Mom and her family are still in town, but since we are all staying at our childhood home for a few days, we don't care. My dad is sad that Sam is heartbroken, but is trying to cheer him up along with my boyfriend and my SIL. I had to delete/deactivate my SM because I kept getting nasty comments and messages, but the more people learn the reason Sam run away, the less it gets. I am still sorry she felt humiliated, but my brother comes first. Edit 2. We are 34, 32, and 28. Ex-SIL is 30. Not in the US. I asked Joe about the church aftermath and it was just as I expected it. He says he stood up in front of everybody and told them Sam was not coming and to please go home, and all their gifts delivered to our side of the family will be given back ASAP. The ex was still outside the church when someone in her family informed her, and she started screaming and crying and calling Sam nonstop. Mom tried to talk to Joe that didn't even look at her, and when she couldn't get a reaction out of him, she started crying loudly and lamenting how horrible we are to her, and some people started consoling her. This is her MO, but Joe and his wife didn't care. When they went out of the church, the ex was expecting them and demanding to see Sam, but Joe said no. Then she demanded to know what to do with the party, and he said if she didn't want the venue he would arrange for the food to be donated to the staff there so it wouldn't go to waste. Everybody was screaming except Joe because he didn't want to give Mom the satisfaction. They, Joe plus SIL, came home after stopping at the supermarket and some fast food joints, and we have been inside like we are kids again, plus 2 more members. We asked Sam if he wanted them to go, but he said he wanted them there. We had all taken time off to spend family time after the wedding anyway, so it's not a problem at the moment. When the ex came to the gate, we knew she was not going to use the venue, so my SIL called them with Sam's info, told them to take the food, and also sent them some tips for their trouble. It seems we will get back all the alcohol that my dad paid for, so we will have a very drunk end of the year. A couple of people messaged me asking why did our dad ever marry our mom, and the answer is he really loved her and believed she was the nicest person ever. Turns out she wasn't, but she knew nobody, except I guess her nasty husband, would marry her unless she pretended to be nice. He considered staying with her until we were adults, but she kept getting worse. She used to get very nice and he thought she was changing, and then she would change again. As per my ex-SIL, We have no doubt that she believes mom is a nice person that has ungrateful children because she is extremely charming and for some people is funny to make fun of others as long as it's not directed at them, but it still doesn't excuse X. The only person Sam gave an explanation was his boss who was at the church, but he is very understanding and was pretty shocked of what mom put us through since we are fairly adjusted happy people. Our dad said that it was a shock for all of us and we can stay home as long as we need. Sam is moving home for the time being. I showed my family the post and they are moved by your niceness, but Sam wants you all to know X wasn't showing any concerning behaviors and he truly believes she understood his upbringing. He agreed to talk to her and her parents today, but only if it's at our home and we are there to support him, so it's going to be an interesting visit.
Next story.
My friend got hard while wrestling me. My friends are over right now, and we just do the usual stuff like playing COD Zombies and talking about girls and stuff. We wrestle occasionally playfully with him, usually winning. BC, he's just physically stronger and bigger than me. I'm on the smaller, slimmer side. But today, we were wrestling with us both shirtless cause it's hottest in Texas while wrestling. When I was on top of him trying to pin him, I felt him get hard. It made me hard as well, and we kinda stared at each other in shock or SMTH. He's still at my house and we're both alone. It's super awkward. RN, we're both 16. Does this make us gay, or is it just our bodies being aroused? He sorta told me he likes me, I think. Y'all confusing TF out of me. He asked to experiment a bit, and I said yes to help him out to see if he was gay. We kissed, and he said he was probably gay for me since my bodies are feminine, and then he said I'm cute. We both got hard from the kiss, but I still don't think I'm gay. Maybe he is gay, but I don't think I'm gay. I might continue helping him find out if he's gay or not, but only as a friend. BC, I wanna help him find out. He told me he's gay and that he does like me. He says it's because I'm similar to a girl, and because I look gay. I don't know what he means by looks gay. I told him I don't know if I'm gay like he is, so now we're sitting in silence, but he's kinda holding me from behind, and I feel too awkward to say anything about it. I'm not gay, but my friend is, so I'ma just support him and stuff. He wants me to be his boyfriend, but I'm not gay, so I just told him to let me think about it. He is still at my house since he was originally staying the night. We've just been mostly quiet with the occasional questions or requests he asked. I'm probably not going to do anything with him because I'm not gay, and if you're going to call me gay, at least try to give a reason.
Next story.
Of course, he would answer, arrogant and condescending, tough, counterattacking, apparently not suspecting a trap being laid. Since she refuted nothing he said, even seemed to be accepting his lies and a bit chagrined at times, the 200 or so of us in the courtroom felt sorry for her. Deputy Thug was verbally beating her up to the extent the judge would let him, and we were losing hope that she had anything to offer to support her case, until she finished her line of inquiry and turned on the visuals. She turned from Columbo into a 16-year-old ace prosecutor and proved with the slides and film that every single answer he had given her was a lie. She had not even been where he claimed and wrote on the ticket that the incident happened. He had not pulled her at the time he said and wrote. There was no stop sign where he said she had run one. The speed limit at the place he cited was higher than he said she was driving, on and on and on. Then, after she had disproven all his claims beyond a doubt, she proved that both the place she actually was and the place he falsely claimed to have pulled her weren't even in his jurisdiction. He had no right to pull her or ticket her, let alone threaten to arrest her, as if she had been committing grand theft auto. And during that process, she handled him as if she had 30 years experience in dismantling the defenses of hardened criminals, and he lost control and exploded at her when he realized she had shown him up as a liar and abuser of his authority. The entire courtroom erupted in loud cheers and applause as the judge, enraged well before this point, dismissed the case and shredded the deputy, saying that he was a disgrace to his uniform and that he himself was deeply offended by the lies just told, also implying that serious consequences were in order. Unfortunately, the judge had no control over police personnel, and Deputy Thug was not fired. But he stopped harassing our community and we never saw the swagger and arrogance again. All because a 16-year-old decided to take the time and trouble to carefully prepare a real defense and offense instead of just paying the fine. I wondered if one of her parents might have been an attorney. Someone close to her could have advised, but the girl did it all. I hope she is fighting for the right somewhere today. The lesson I learned is that it sometimes pays to take small cases that seem to have little chance of success to court. What's the smartest thing you've seen in court? The smartest thing I ever saw in a court wasn't accomplished by an attorney, but by a 16-year-old girl. I bet she's a lawyer now, as it was some years ago. If not, she's surely doing something that requires similar talents and abilities, because she removed a threat and constant victimizer from our community when lawyers couldn't. It wasn't a particularly important case, but she approached it acting as her own attorney and as if she had been arrested for unaliving someone. She even brought her own self-produced Technicolor slide and video shows. She had been pulled for speeding and running a stop sign by a county deputy who was the brain of our resort community, from which the only way into the city where many of us worked or had other homes was by passing through a small town. Deputy Thug, as we called him, often lay in wait behind huge trees in the darkness, not just for lawbreakers but for people to harass at night when observers were not about. His favorite victims were minorities and teenagers and younger women of any race. He never pulled mature men, even if they were flying low, or older women, maybe for fear of husbands and sons, or maybe they reminded him of his mother. Almost all of our law enforcement officers were extremely polite and courteous, even if they hauled you off to jail. But people were afraid of this man. Everyone, even other deputies, knew that those he pulled were far more likely to be innocent than guilty and that he threatened violence and set people up, but no one had been able to prove it, with or without lawyers. Deputy Thug was not merely a liar, but a bully with no one controlling him. He was proud of his reputation for the most tickets, the most arrests, the most feared, etc. He yelled, screamed, called names, demanded people, especially boys, get out of cars so he could shove them around and try to provoke them into something he could arrest them for. He threatened, he intimidated, he accused them of serious crimes. I know it was true, because I saw it, and spoke up about it, and later I was also targeted. He was nasty and very threatening until I convinced him I knew my rights and for reasons not worth going into here, he wouldn't be as likely to win my kind of fight as he would a violent one against a teenage boy. Miss 16-year-old approached the docket like Perry Mason pretending to be Columbo. You would have to see it and hear a lot of detail to get the brilliance of how she set him up, but just to simplify it, she asked him question after question, about what she did, where she was, why that was illegal, where he was, what he saw, what he did, when he did it, on and on. She repeated every important question, asking twice if you were absolutely sure beyond a doubt.
Next story.
What is something that makes you the most happy? I'm so happy that my ex-wife is miserable. Found out my wife was having an affair. She met a guy at work and came home one day telling me she was in love with him, no longer loved me, and wanted a divorce. This was a guy she'd only known for 3 months. At the time, she and I had been together since we were in our 20s. We have 3 kids. Well, I tried to fight for my marriage and didn't want a divorce, but she simply would not stop seeing this guy. After one weekend where she disappeared from Friday afternoon to Sunday night, I ended up throwing her out of the house. She immediately moved in with this guy. The only excuse she ever gave me was, I never wanted to hurt you, but there's just something about this guy, and I deserve to be happy. That was it. That was the depth of her reasoning for throwing everything we built together away. We ended up finalizing our divorce in early 2022. Although I had very hard feelings toward her, I faked it enough to get pretty favorable divorce terms from her. It seemed she was so eager to be with her dream man that she didn't have time for a long divorce. So in the end, I got to keep my pension in the house, which I had bought for my grandmother. I did have to give her half of my 401k. However, the effect on our kids was pretty devastating. All 3 of them took it very hard. My oldest son told her that if she chose this man, he'd never have a relationship with her again. As of right now, neither of our sons has a relationship with their mother. Our daughter does talk to her from time to time, but their relationship is very strained to say the least. My daughter is a very kind person and she tries, but she usually ends her conversations with her mother even more upset than when they started. About 4 months after the divorce, my ex contacted me out of the blue. She told me she had made a terrible mistake and asked if she could come home. Her dream man turned out to be an alcoholic who she says is verbally abusive and wasted all of her money. I used this opportunity to tell her exactly what I thought of her as a person, a wife and a mother. I told her this was her life now and to deal with it. I told her she no longer had a home at this house and to never contact me again. Then a few things happened over the last year that have driven her to start trying to contact me again. First off, I met someone. My sister introduced me to a friend of hers who is also divorced, and she and I hit it off. We've been seeing each other since last summer, and while we've agreed that neither of us wants to get married again, we are together. Once my ex heard about this, she once again tried to contact me, but I ignored her. My son also got married and didn't invite his mother. She again contacted me to try to get me to intervene on her behalf. I told her I would talk to him, but I never did. Secretly, I feel like she deserves all the pain she's feeling when it comes to our kids. She destroyed our family without so much as an afterthought. Too bad. So sad. Now, she recently told our daughter that she finally broke it off with a dream man because she could take his drinking and total lack of responsibility. He wasted her half of the 401k that I had to give her. He also totaled her car driving drunk. This from a man in his 40s. Again, she knew this guy for 3 months and torpedoed our whole family for him. On the face of it, I act like I feel sorry for her, but inside, I really delight in the fact that she's so unhappy. Call me evil or whatever, I don't care. She brought this on herself, and it serves her right. I actually had to sit there one Saturday night while she got ready for a date with this guy and laughed on the phone with her friend about how awkward our living situation was. I lived in hell for over a year because of her. Wait until she finds out our son and his wife are going to have a baby later this year. Maybe if she had been able to keep her legs closed, she'd get to meet her grandchild. Enjoy your shitty 1-bedroom apartment and your broken down used car. Me and my new partner will think of you when we're on vacation in Hawaii this summer. Hawaii was the trip my ex and I always planned to take once our daughter finished college. Maybe I'll send her pictures.
Next story.
My ex-girlfriend came back after 10 years and called me a liar when she found out I had already moved on. Back when I was 14 years old, I fell in love with one of my classmates in school. She's kinda gullible in a cute way, and laughs so hard at my jokes even at her expense. I started courting her, and she was hesitant at first given that we were very close friends, but she told me she'd give me a chance since she loves being around me. After 3 to 4 months of courting, she then said yes, and we became officially boyfriend and girlfriend. We fell in love so hard and dated until we graduated high school. After the graduation, it was summer break, she told me she needs to live with her sister in the capital city to attend college. I told her that it would be okay for us, and that we could make a long-distance relationship work. I studied at one of the universities in our province, and she went with her sister to the city. We communicated a lot over the few months of us being away. I called her for our 4th anniversary, and told me that no matter what I should wait for her. But, then a few months later, she suddenly disappeared. I couldn't call her phone, her social media accounts became inactive. When I saw that she had a new account, just not one following me, I realized finally that she ghosted me. When I tried to reach out, I was ignored. This broke me. Suddenly, she became somebody that I used to know. A couple months into this breakup, one of her friends came to the same campus that I went to. I just politely said hello to her, and she asked me to go out at a cafe near our campus after classes. We met at the cafe, and told me that my ex said she was sorry, and gave me a letter she sent. The letter said that she can't make it work having a long-distance boyfriend, and she just wanted to move on, and wished me best. It freaking hurt. I thanked her friend, went to my boarding house, and cried ugly, but I decided to respect her decision, and moved on. A year passed, and I met a girl in a workshop. I attended. We had the same line of course, just at different schools. I asked for her number to schedule a study session. She was tomboyish, so at first I didn't really notice her in a romantic way. As we started hanging out more, I realized I really liked this girl. She started wearing fit clothes, and I noticed her face was really pretty when her hair was not ponytailed. After almost a year of hanging out, I courted her, and she excitedly said yes, saying that she liked me for the longest time. She just didn't want to initiate something because it was kind of frowned upon in our country. Now, we're both professionals, have a cute daughter, and have been married for 8 years. Suddenly, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my ex-girlfriend asking if we could meet for coffee. I hesitated but agreed, in one condition. I told her I had to bring my wife. She became furious on the phone, and called me a liar and manipulator. But she still insisted on meeting me without my wife, so I told her I would meet her in a public place. When we met, I started the conversation with "Hi, how have you been?" She told me she had a 4-year-old son, but got separated from her partner. She also told me that she went back to our province for me, and when she found out I was married with a family, she was shocked because I promised her that I'd wait for her. I was stunned with the audacity, as she stuttered, trying to control her crying. I stopped her, and told her while gritting my teeth, "Thank you for coming back for me. But, you can't just come back in my life after 10 years, after abandoning me, and having a son and other relationships." I told her to never contact me again. I stood up, thanked the staffs in the stall, eyes red from my emotions, and went to my wife and daughter in another restaurant. When I got home, I told my wife the story, and she hugged me. I am very thankful with everything I have right now. That ex may be my first love, but my wife is my greatest.
Next story.
Parents, what is the worst thing you have ever told your child? I told my first son that I have 2 sons and he's not either of them. When I was 20, I got my girlfriend at the time pregnant. I was scared but I manned up and married her. It was hard but we made it work for 8 years until I caught her cheating. I ended the marriage, and began co-parenting my, at the time, son. He was my world. My dad wasn't there for me at all, so I swore to myself I would be the best father I could. I had my then son every weekend. I was always on time and ready to go. Even though I worked full-time and was going to school, I made sure he always had my full attention when he was with me. He was my best friend and my son. Even though money was tight, we had some amazing adventures. He loved spending time with my family, and even had friends in my neighborhood. I thought we were doing well, until he was around 11. At that point he started to not want to visit me. His mother had a new boyfriend who was well off. I knew he was taking them on trips and doing fun activities on the weekends, so, at first, I didn't make a stink. But about 6 months after they started dating, my son was seeing me maybe 1 weekend a month. After about 9 months he stopped coming altogether. After 3 months of calling, chasing, and begging, I was getting nowhere. So my family came together and hired a lawyer to sue my ex for parental alienation. I lost, and was ordered to pay more child support. As I was leaving the courtroom, my ex's lawyer approached me and offered to cancel child support if I gave up my paternal rights. I flat refused until the lawyer said this was both my ex-wife's and my then son's wishes. I asked to speak to my son alone and they agreed as long as both lawyers were in the room. I spoke to my son and asked him if he really wanted me to give up my rights, and he said yeah. I explained that it would mean I wouldn't be his dad and he couldn't come visit me or my family anymore. He looked me dead in the eyes, like he was asking the time, and said, "Yeah, so?" I was shattered. I asked again if he really understood what he was saying, and he said yes, he wanted to be my ex's boyfriend's son. I signed the papers that day. From that day until 2 days ago he never spoke or contacted me, or any of my family. It literally almost killed me. I started to drink, and stayed drunk for weeks. Finally, one day, I drank until I passed out and aspirated my own vomit. I would be dead now except the mailman dropped a package addressed to me to my neighbor's house and she saw me convulsing through my window, and called 911. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with aspiration pneumonia. After that I moved back to my hometown, got a new job, hit the gym, and spent 4 years in intense psychotherapy. I was finally able to let it all go, and move on with my life. About 6 years after my move, I met my now wife, and she had an 11-year-old son. I was standoffish with him at first, but that kid was so amazing that I couldn't help but fall in love with him. The day he turned 18, he asked me to adopt him. It was the proudest day of my life. He and his mother turned my life around and gave me a reason for living. Now not only do I have my wonderful adopted son who is currently serving in the Marines, but I also have a 4-year-old son and 18-month-old daughter. My career has also taken off, and I'm doing very well for myself and my family. I went from a man no one could love, to a successful father of 3 with a beautiful wife and family. I survived. Then about 3 weeks ago I got a call at my office. It was my ex-sister-in-law. She informed me that my ex had passed. I simply said, "Okay," and hung up. It's been 14 years since I've had any contact with any of those people, and I have no desire to know anything about them now. Soon after, my family and I were getting ready to go to a picnic when there was a knock on the door. I recognized him through the front glass. It was my first biological offspring. I opened the door and he said, "Hey Dad, it's your son." Without an ounce of hesitation I said, "No you're not. I have 2 sons and you're not either one of them. Now please leave my property." He just stood there kind of dumbfounded as I shut the door. After a moment he left. I then put out a text to my family, letting them know that he was lurking around, and I have no intention of having any contact with him. I then told them I will cut anyone who does contact him out of my life completely. It's been 14 years. I don't owe him or his family anything. I had to listen to my mother cry for him on her deathbed over that child. I laid in a hospital bed with a machine breathing for me, wishing it would turn off and let me die because of that child. I learned in therapy that he had the right to make his own choices, but that I also have the right to make mine. My choice was to move on without him as part of my family, as he wanted. He has no right to come back into my life and disturb me or my family now. My entire family agrees with me. Even my wife and my in-laws agree that nothing good can come of this. He's 26 years old now. Now that his mother is dead all of a sudden I'm up to bat? I don't care if he was 12 or 200, he made the call, and if you had seen the look in his eyes when he said yeah, so? You would have known like I did that he didn't give a damn about me. So I had to stop giving a damn about him to survive. He doesn't have the right to ambush me on my front porch and act like he's anything to me now. Well, come to find out my sister is the one who has been giving him and my ex-sister-in-law my contact info. My sister is inconsolable that I won't give him a chance. Apparently he called her after he came to my house and broke down. I told her to stop right there, I don't care, but now she's begging me, for our mother's sake, to meet with this kid. So I ask you, is there anything good that can come out of a meeting with this kid now?
Next story.
My little brother confessed his secret to me. Now I have to get him away from my parents. I noticed a shift in my brother's personality at the start of this year and didn't think much of it. He's 16 and I'm 25, and I live fully on my own. One day, our parents asked me to start spending extra time with him, taking him on hikes and to play basketball and so on. No big deal. We're not super close but do hang out occasionally. Then they started asking me to comment on girls in front of him, which seemed weird, so I didn't do it. Once, when we were hanging out, I noticed he didn't have his phone, so I asked him if he forgot it. He told me he was being punished and not allowed to use it unless one of my parents watches him. I asked if he got caught looking at adult films on it or something, but he really just wanted me to drop it, so I did. Later, when I asked our parents about it, they told me that he and his best friend had gotten caught with pills, which is why he was not allowed to see him anymore. I had already started feeling weird about how under lock and key my brother seemed and honestly didn't know if I should believe them or not. I had offered him Mary Jane before and he said no, so it just didn't seem like something he'd do. So I went to the Starbucks his best friend works at to see what he said or to see if I needed to kick his butt over it. When I got there, he told me a very different story. He told me that my brother was his boyfriend and that our parents caught them kissing and flipped out. Afterwards, they tossed him out and made sure they couldn't see each other or even talk to each other. He told me that he had been worried and was trying anything he could to contact my brother, but he hadn't heard anything back. I was skeptical, but he showed me some messages and pictures that confirmed they were indeed a couple. I thanked him for telling me and told him I'd do what I can to help him and my brother. After that, I was trying to figure out the best way to help my brother. I didn't want to do any more damage to him than what they had done, so I was nervous about saying something since he hadn't come out to me. I also really wanted to flip off on my parents, but I knew that at the moment, that was not the best option. At that point, I was the only person they let him go out alone with. So if I went off on them or told them I knew, they would most likely cut me out, completely isolating him, which was not a good idea given how depressed he'd been. I decided to go find his boyfriend at Starbucks again a couple days after. When I found him, I was able to have him write a note for my brother. I figured it would be best to have something to lead into the conversation. Additionally, I wanted him to write his number down in case my brother didn't know it off the top of his head and wanted to text him from my phone. After that, I picked my brother up like normal and fought the urge to go off on my mom. I've never had the best relationship with my parents, but I can honestly say I hated them now. The game plan was supposed to be going for a hike, but on that day I told him let's get food instead. I figured he might get emotional and I honestly didn't want him near cliffs or hiking emotionally exhausted. I then told him I had seen his friend. I explained how he gave me a letter to give to him, that it was in the glove box with my phone so he could text him if he wanted. I thought he was going to rip the door off the glove box when he opened it. He read the letter and started crying so bad that I pulled over. He didn't understand why I would help him. Apparently our awful parents had him convinced that I would beat the crap out of him if I knew. I thought he'd call or text his boyfriend right away, but he spent at least an hour sobbing. I just kept reassuring him that nothing was wrong with him, that he's not broken or damaged or something that can or needs to be fixed. I felt like a broken record, but I think it helped, or at least I hope it did. After he calmed down, I was able to talk to him for the rest of the drive, dinner, and even most of the night. I told our parents he'd crash at my place cause it got late when we grabbed food, and said that we got talking to 2 girls, which admittedly led to no fight or questions. He then told me they hadn't physically hurt him, but when they found out, they trashed his room searching for anything gay. This meant anything rainbow or not masculine enough, and they destroyed anything found, including a couple printed pictures he had with his boyfriend. They also deleted all the pictures off his phone and blocked his boyfriend on it. Anytime he used a laptop or phone, they would sit right next to him like vultures. The rest of the time they kept the devices locked up from him. He told me they searched his room once a week just in case he found a way to sneak something in. The rest of the time they either didn't talk to him or berated him and yelled at him about how he needed to be cured and fixed. He cried a lot throughout talking about all of this stuff, including me asking the tough question that he didn't want to answer. I asked about how depressed he had been. If he's been self-harming or contemplating self-slaughter. I'll admit, I cried when he answered. He had been self-harming and thought about unaliving himself even while on our hikes. I made him promise me that he won't self-harm and that if he thinks about doing it, to lie however he has to and call me. I told him if anything happens to him because of my parents, I would unalive them. We talked about options and what could be done. I agreed to help him meet up with his boyfriend whenever possible and get him out of that house as often as possible. He did end up calling his boyfriend between us talking, which made him cry more but smile too. I promised him I'd do anything I could to get him out of that house permanently, whether it was an emancipation fight for custody or whatever. He hugged me more that day and night than I think I've ever hugged anyone. It's embarrassing to admit, but he even slept in my bed. He was able to see his boyfriend the next day before I had to bring him back home, which freaking killed me inside. Luckily, I was able to get my brother out on another occasion soon after. I had planned to go camping with my best friend and was able to take my brother and his boyfriend with us. It was really nice to see them together and so happy. Soon after, I went over to go help him with a project. I discussed some ideas with him and told him that if I could pull one off, I might be able to give him a spot to hide a phone, cause I really wanted him to have one for an emergency. Thankfully, I was able to make it work and got him a phone to keep stashed to contact me and his boyfriend. After that, I immediately got to working with an attorney. He got to work soon after. It took some time, and after some chaos, my brother is now living with me. It's not a done deal by any means. We have a court date in a month, but at least till then he can live with me. My attorney has been fantastic and fast with helping me get things done. We're working on emancipation or me becoming his legal guardian until he's 18. Now that my brother is with me, he is feeling great, but I'm still gonna make sure he starts seeing a therapist since it will help with the legal stuff if he is. I'm beyond relieved. It was killing a part of me knowing he was in that situation. We were able to get a temporary no contact order against our parents so we don't have to deal with them till court. I'm hoping everything plays out right so that we could eventually cut them off permanently.
Next story.
My father blamed my sister for my mother's death and neglected her for it. Now he's upset that she calls me dad. I am the older brother to my 5-year-old little sister, Belle, and have always been the one to take care of her. For some background, my parents had me as teenagers when they were 15 and 16. Even as a kid, I could always feel that they regretted having me. After I was born, both my mother and father were practically disowned by their family. My mother had to drop out of high school to take care of me while my father worked 2 jobs just to provide, and even then they couldn't afford a home. So, they lived with my mother's older sister until I was 9 and my father got his GED and managed to get a better job and move us out. Despite our living situation being better, it was clear to me that they believed their lives were ruined because of me. Whenever I misbehaved like any normal child, they'd use the fact that they gave up their lives for me, and I still had the audacity to behave like this. Even when I didn't misbehave, they never treated me with much love. I barely got to get new clothing. They'd get my clothes from Goodwill and practically refused to get me anything nice unless they had to for events like birthdays, parties, meeting friends, and their wedding. My birthdays were always celebrated with the bare minimum. They'd get me a cupcake and a single gift, which was never anything I wanted. Despite everything, I was still a child who just wanted their love. However, as I grew older, I began to accept I wouldn't get it and made peace with that. I guess somewhere along the line my parents realized I gave up on them and tried to treat me better through my teen years. But, at that point I wasn't the child who begged for their love anymore. I never received the love of my parents and I wasn't asking for it anymore. Although I can't say I kept hating them, in my eyes we were practically strangers. I never got to know them truly as they raised me with the bare minimum, never had any real conversations with me and never spent any quality time with me. They also knew nothing about me, so them suddenly trying to play parents with me was awkward to say the least. When I was 18, my mother got pregnant. I guess that was when they gave up on trying to fix things with me as they could have a new child to start over with. They didn't treat me poorly again, but it felt like we were strangers living in the same home. When I turned 19, my mother gave birth to a girl, but due to some complications she didn't end up surviving. This crushed my father. He began to resent me for not being as sad as he was over her death, despite the fact that she was barely a mother to me. He also blamed his daughter for killing his wife. He was never home after the incident and I was left taking care of my sister. I ended up having to take a break from college after the time I came home from my classes to my sister screaming with hunger in an unchanged diaper while my father was out drinking. I took care of Belle full time and tried calling out my father multiple times, but he always got angry. He would always end the conversation with him saying I could always leave Belle at the fire station if I wanted. I eventually gave up on forcing him to be a father. Despite everything, I truly loved Belle. She was the sweetest and cutest kid. She was almost always smiley and surprisingly slept through the night. Once she was old enough, I enrolled her in daycare and continued my education while working night shifts. I always made sure to leave a good portion of afternoons empty so I could spend time with her. She always knew who her actual father was, and as she grew older she began to try and spend time with him. She would follow him around the house, but of course that quickly ended after he blew up on her and she began to fear him. Soon after, I realized she saw me as a parental figure despite knowing I was her brother. When she was old enough for preschool, I found out she was telling people I was her father. I never mentioned it to her and just let it be until she gave her Father's Day card she made in preschool to me. I then told her that if she wanted, she could call me dad, and since then she's been calling me daddy. Then my father got a girlfriend. He began to change himself as he stopped drinking, got a better job, and even began to take over a majority of the bills other than the portion I agreed to pay. He never really tried being a father to Belle, but he did begin to eat breakfast with us. Regardless of any changes, that breakfast was spent in silence other than me and Belle talking. Fast forward to a few months ago on Belle's birthday. I had planned a party for her and invited her preschool class. My father ended up attending. I guess his girlfriend thought it would be a good time to meet his daughter as she was the only one who looked excited to be there. Anyways, while she was opening gifts I surprised her with one of those kids' electric cars. She screamed and hugged me, yelling how she loved me and called me daddy. After the party and after Belle was fast asleep, my father asked me what the hell happened. I was confused until he yelled asking why his daughter was calling me daddy. I asked him if he seriously didn't know why. That's when I told him that I was the one who raised her, I bought her everything, I celebrated her firsts, and I was the one who didn't abandon her. He was quiet and went to bed. Since then he's tried to play father and talk to her but he was a stranger to her. She is a sweet girl so she entertained my father's conversation but he could tell how awkward she felt and it was clear it hurt him. Despite how selfish it is, I don't want their relationship to get better. After all, just as she saw me as her dad, I saw her as my daughter. I graduated college and I'm looking for a better job so I can move Belle and I into our own home. I may be a bad person for enjoying my father's misery and regret but I'll never be as bad as him.
Next story.
My wife wanted to open our marriage. Now I have a new lover and she regrets everything. Never once did I think I would get to this point, but here we are. My wife and I have been together for 10 years but married for 8. We met in college and were each other's firsts and only. I honestly thought we had a unique and beautiful relationship because of that, but it appears that was just me. Some time ago, my wife began working at a new company. At first, she found it difficult to fit in because she's always been reserved. But after encouragement from me, she made friends with a group of girls, some of whom were single, divorced or dating, but not married. At first I was happy she made friends, but then she started going out for drinks and partying. I became concerned by her change in behavior and tried to talk to her about it, but at the same time didn't want to restrict her in any way. It started to affect our relationship in the bedroom. My wife wasn't one to initiate intimacy, but with her continued going out, she was either too tired or wasn't in the mood. At some point, her company got a new manager whom my wife and her friends had taken a liking to. She began mentioning him in passing, but it got to a point where she was pointing out how he handled certain problems that didn't seem to be work-related. I questioned her on her fascination with this man and she brushed off my concerns. She even started asking if I regretted not having more experience with women, to which I said no, because she is all I ever needed. For a moment, I saw a flash of sadness in her eyes, but she quickly changed the subject. She started mentioning open marriage as a way to spice things up. I was taken aback because my wife has never been this kind of person. To be honest, I had first refused and questioned if this had anything to do with the new manager, to which she denied, but said she felt like she missed out but at the same time didn't want to lose me so this was a safer option. I wondered if she was playing with fire, then reluctantly and naively agreed. So for a year my wife goes on dates, has one-night stands, then, as if I didn't see it coming, somehow is in some kind of relationship with that manager. On the other hand, I had a few dates, but no one-night stands because it frequently felt wrong to me. My wife would ask if I was fine, but it really wouldn't change her behavior. At some point, I felt the love I had for her was gone and it was killing me inside. I ended up going on a date with an amazing woman who migrated over from South Korea. Of course, this led to more dates. Until we were intimate, I honestly never had intimacy like I had with this woman. I never knew a woman could be so giving and make one feel so desirable. At first my wife thought it was cute, but as the months went by, she began questioning my relationship with my lover. I promptly pointed out that this was her idea, and that she was in a relationship with the manager I was concerned about. She was silent. She looked like she wanted to say something but held her tongue. She began coming home early to surprise me with dinner and get the house extra clean. She also started coming to my workplace to drop off lunch and began to initiate intimacy in the bedroom. Honestly, if it wasn't for her opening up our marriage, all this would have had me jumping for joy. I barely gave in to her attempts at intimacy, and when I did, it was simply to get it over with. Something in me towards my wife had died, so it didn't hit the same. I asked what brought this change in her. The response I got was that she wants to show me that she loves me and is happy with me. I never intended to, but I burst out laughing. I asked what about her little group of friends, her manager lover or her one-night stands? She didn't respond that day and simply went to bed in tears. The next day, I got home to find her waiting for me. She told me she wants to close our marriage. She said, "This whole experience was a horrible mistake. I regret everything and want us to be focused on our relationship again." I told her to be honest with me and tell me what inspired all this in the first place. And wouldn't you know it, it was for a group of friends that planted the idea because of their numerous intimate exploits. And when her manager came around, he surprisingly supported that lifestyle and encouraged my wife to live free. Apparently, it developed into an emotional affair, but only got physical once the marriage opened. She described it as being drunk behind the wheel of a speeding car. It was thrilling and intoxicating, but the price of the decision has become too much for her to bear. She sees now that she never needed a comparison and that what we had was truly unique and special. But now she feels like she murdered our marriage and any chance of a life together. I told her I might not ever be able to see her as my wife again and this made her break down in front of me. I simply held her in silence as she cried until she fell asleep in my arms on the couch. She has since left her job and cut off contact with all of her friends and her manager. But I haven't cut contact with my lover. Quite frankly, she makes me feel like a man. The truth is, I don't know what to do in this situation. I would love to get the special feeling back if possible, but my lover basically saved me when I was at my lowest. So I decided to seek therapy. The therapist seemed nice and experienced. She appeared unbiased and actually eager to help. Even in the very first session, my wife took it as an opportunity to lay it all out. She confessed that this group of friends made her wonder if she had missed her chance because she was committed to her first boyfriend and had no other experiences. She then added that after the new manager started approaching her, some of these friends encouraged her to see where it goes and that this was a chance for her to discover herself. She obviously felt guilty. So she never did anything physical until one of the divorced ones suggested an open marriage as the loophole and told her that some couples come out stronger because of it. So after regrettably convincing me to open up the marriage, her so-called adventure began. It was intoxicating and blinding, but lacked real substance, not like the kind we built over the years. And she started to question her reasons for doing this. She said she could see the hurt in my eyes, but told herself this was an adventure. The gravity of it all never really hit her until she noticed the change in me. She said she suddenly felt a pit in her stomach and started to get panic attacks for no reason. She went to her friends for advice again, but they said it was a normal reaction for me to have during the adventure. She realized how ridiculous this all was and begged them to help her win me back. But they just told her if she couldn't deal with it, why did she open her marriage in the first place? She knew then and there that these people were toxic and a threat to our marriage and the life we've built. Hence, she's been on a mission to win me back by any means necessary. I didn't share much, but I did let the counselor know about the situation on my side with my lover still in the picture. The counselor said no resolution could ever be reached with my lover still in the picture and suggested we book another appointment after tomorrow. During our second session of counseling, I asked if she was sure nothing physical happened before the opening of our marriage. She looked towards the ground and begged me not to make her say it. She said it would destroy us. But after some pushing, she shared that it wasn't physical, but they touched themselves in front of each other. This moron convinced her that since it wasn't physical, it wasn't technically cheating. I was absolutely floored by this, and she started shaking and hyperventilating. Snot even began flowing from her nostrils as she cried and apologized to me. At this point, even the counselor was taken aback and had a look of disbelief. My wife got on her knees and hugged my legs, saying how sorry she was. I then asked her what really changed her view of him. She said that one evening as she was leaving a meeting, she passed his office and heard him speaking about her to another male colleague. He said he was surprised at how easy it was to get her and how she is living proof that you can't trust the quiet ones. When the colleague asked if he actually fancied her, his response was that she was a pleasant distraction and that he had absolutely no intention of breaking up with his fiancée. He also mentioned how he felt bad for me, but you snooze, you lose my wife. Upon realizing that she was nothing more than a piece of meat to this man. Added by the fact that she betrayed me for a cheap thrill actually made her want to end herself. At that moment, she said she left her workplace and vomited in the parking lot. I then asked her if she loved him and when it was that she stopped loving me, she looked me dead in the eye through tears and said she never stopped loving me. Which honestly makes it worse. She thought it was love, but now realizes how foolish she was. She squeezed my arm with surprising strength and said she knows she messed up, but she misses us and the connection we had before all this. She even suggested we move away and start fresh, just the two of us, just as it was meant to be. I then told her it wouldn't be fair to my lover and that I need time away from her to process all this. She started sobbing harder and saying incoherent things. She held on to me as if I was going to disappear. The counselor managed to convince her that maybe time apart could help us heal. When we got home, I began to pack. My wife got a video call from her laptop from one of her former friends in tears. It turns out that after my wife resigned, this friend and the manager began a fling of their own. But apparently, she had a pregnancy scare. To make matters worse, she had a boyfriend whom she apparently could see a future with. And the only reason why she even had a fling was because she was curious about the experience. Funny how that seems to be a trend. Her boyfriend found out because he discovered an email between the two discussing the potential pregnancy. But the manager accused her of baby-trapping him. I just turned and left. I have been staying in an apartment ever since. I have also seen a divorce lawyer at my brother's recommendation, just to be safe. As of now, I am not really willing to fight for this marriage. And it seems my wife can sense it. Before I left, she tried to initiate intimacy. But when I refused, she yelled and asked, "What does your lover do for you that I can't?" I didn't respond. I shook my head and told her if she still couldn't tell after all that's happened, then it's clear where our marriage is headed and left. The sad truth is that she would do anything to go back and not make the same bad choices. But things don't work that way. Good luck to you, Rain.
Next story.
My brother is marrying a minor, and her parents approve. My, 20, brother Ellis, 40, is the typical golden boy of the family. Not that he made any outstanding achievements. He is simply the firstborn of 5 children. The other 4 of us stayed away from him from a very young age. Mom always protected him, and Dad coddled him since he was the heir. As if we were some feudal royal family. It must also be mentioned here that our parents belong to a very fundamental sect. Our grandparents, whether maternal, Wilsons, or paternal, Millers, disapprove of our upbringing, so the rest of us 4 fled to them as soon as we were 14. In fact, our parents didn't care. They were content only to disown us but took no legal action. Me and my brother Julian, 23, grew up with our dad's parents, while Aaron, 30, and Isaac, 35, grew up with our mother's parents. Aaron and Isaac are now married, have good jobs, and live normal lives. Both sets of grandparents are very good friends, and the 4 of us practically grew up together. No estrangement here. Ellis stayed with our parents on the farm in the middle of nowhere. As far as we know, he doesn't even have a high school degree and can't even read what Grandma said. I'm going to college, and Julian is training to be a carpenter. Recently we all got an invitation to an engagement party. Ellis was probably about to get married. Nobody was quite sure how he managed to convince a woman to even get into a relationship with him, but I can't say that I was interested either. Since we had not seen our parents and Ellis for a long time, we agreed to come and decided to drive to the farm together. Our grannies baked cakes, and Grandpa Miller brought his infamous brisket. It was a kind of peace offering since he and Dad had parted with an argument. When we arrived at our parents' house, Mom and Dad greeted us in the yard. Ellis was there, too. He looked terrible. He'd put on a lot of weight, stank like hell, and seemed a little drunk. I was horrified. It got even worse when he introduced us to his fiancée. She was no taller than 5'1", hadn't even hit puberty, and obviously seemed very frightened. Then there were her parents, who looked like they stepped out of The Hills Have Eyes. We all tried to be polite even when we agreed something was wrong. We found out later that evening that Ellis' fiancée was just 12, hadn't gone to public school, and lived with her parents in an old cabin in the woods, and our parents had met their parents at the sex church. Our grandparents and we brothers are all incredibly shocked and afraid for the girl. Ellis already treats her like a dog, and from what we know from our parents, she won't fare any better with them. Her parents seem like they just want to get rid of her. I never thought something like this could happen in real life. My brother is marrying a minor, and her parents approve. Update. Of course, our grandparents couldn't take it for granted that Ellis was about to marry a child. Everyone knew it was illegal. The church wedding to take place in a few weeks was not legal, even if her parents signed the papers. Isaac, who has a friend who works in a law firm, asked what they could do. We ended up reporting everything to the police and CPS. However, this took many weeks. I never thought it would take the authorities so long to react. We weren't there, but later, Isaac said the police raided Mom and Dad's house. Everyone was arrested, and the girl, her name is Una, is now in a foster home. She has serious injuries, and Ellis has apparently already consummated the marriage with her. Una's parents were also arrested. In their hut, the police found 4 more children. All boys and girls no older than 11 and 1 infant. All children are with CPS and will probably never see their parents again. I hope this strange sect to which our parents belong will also be investigated. I can't imagine that this is an isolated case. We got a letter from Una thanking us for helping her. She didn't describe what happened to her, but we could piece it together from what little we knew. Our grandparents offered her to come and visit us if she wanted. Even if she doesn't want that, I hope that her life will be better now, also for her siblings.
Next story.
Why would I take your kids on vacation? You're my ex. I, 39, have been divorced from my ex-husband, 41, for 9 years. We have 2 kids, 12, 9. My husband got married to his new wife and they have 3 kids in total, 9 meters, 5 meters, 5F. They are expecting a 4th one. Me and my ex share custody of our kids. But within these 9 years there has been a drastic change in our economic status. I got promotions and now earn nearly 6 figures. But my ex lost his job that caused his income to change and become low. His recent job pays slightly less than his previous one. Here is the issue: since I can afford to buy a lot of things for my own kids, my ex and his wife don't like it. They say it is unfair to their own kids because they cannot afford to buy new things like I do. And all the children should have the same stuff. Last year I bought my son a laptop because he got the highest score in his exams. My ex didn't like it and told me that I am spoiling my kids and making them into an entitled brat. The issue arrived because his oldest with his wife 9 meters also wanted a laptop too. And for my ex their money is tight, he is the sole provider in their house and his wife is mostly a homemaker but works part-time sometimes. However, it's not like I do this to show off. I do tell my kids to be humble about the things they got and not brag about them. I do buy gifts for my ex's kids on their birthdays and Christmas. In August, my entire family and I have planned to go to Italy. It is supposed to be a family vacation. I will be taking my kids with me. They are excited too. My ex had no problem until he called me and asked if I could take his kids with me too. I was kind of shocked. He explained that they cannot afford to travel and his other kids were insisting that they go on holiday with us as well. They are sort of jealous of my kids for going abroad on a holiday. I straight up told him no. I won't be taking responsibility for someone else's kid. Though I make a lot more money than he does, I cannot afford the accommodation for 6 people. I told him his kids are none of my concern. After he hung up, I got messages from his wife calling me a cruel bee. TCH for ruining her kids' happiness and said I hope you are happy making small children cry. God will be pushing a greedy witch like you. My dad thinks I did the right thing. But my mom thinks I went too far and told me to not take my kids so that their half-siblings don't hate them. My brother suggested that I pay half the price and let my ex pay the other half, which I know he will never listen to. I rejected both the ideas. There is no way I would leave my kids for days to go on a holiday in another country. Was I really cruel? I know it is not the kids' fault, I understand their urge to go on holiday. But asking me to pay for additional 3 kids is too much. Edit, since people are asking, he did cheat on me when I was pregnant with my daughter. His new wife is indeed his mistress. I didn't mention it because I didn't think it was relevant to the story here.
Next story.
What is your biggest confession? When I was a kid, I tried to poison my entire family. I'm the middle child, and one day, I just got fed up because I felt like nobody would take my side. My parents favored my siblings most of the time, so I took the little black bottle at the back of the cupboard, which I thought was poison because it was small and black. I know, I'm stupid, and effing poured it all over the mushroom soup for dinner. I was smirking all throughout dinner, waiting for them to start choking. Turns out it was just vanilla extract. One night I was playing a drinking game with my friends, and everyone thought it would be a hilarious idea for me, the lightweight 18-year-old, to down 20 shots of alcohol. Hence enters F up number 1. It was a combination of a bunch of different liquors including Irish Cream, Tito's Vodka, Fireball, Pink Whitney, and anything and everything we could get our hands on. F up number 2, this was maybe my 2nd or 3rd time drinking, and was not used to alcohol in my system. F up number 3, I didn't know alcohol made me pee so much. We went out to the local elementary school and decided it would be a funny idea to play manhunt in the middle of the night, intoxicated out of our minds. As I was running around, I felt a trickle down my leg. I couldn't hold it in anymore and fell down. I was lying in the grass, in front of an elementary school, staring up at the night sky and pissing myself under the moonlight. That was my first of many, I'm never drinking again stories. As a kid, I swallowed about 15 pennies because I was acting like a piggy bank. I used the Seabat song on my girlfriend, but I think she actually likes it. My girlfriend isn't on any social media like Reddit or TikTok or anything. I came across the Seabat song one day and thought that one Reddit guy was onto something. I tried it out, and she kind of liked it. From time to time, I'll cue up that song when we're having our naughty time and hump to the rhythm. My girl hasn't complained yet, so I'm gonna keep doing it.
Next story.
Did you break your parents? You want your real dad to be on the invitation, to give you away and to sit at the head table? Fine, your real dad can pay for everything too. My stepdaughter will be getting married on August 3rd. The wedding planning has consumed most of her and her mother's life. I say her mother because we aren't married, though we've lived together for 10 years, for the past 6 months. My stepdaughter graduated last December from university. I paid for her to go to college, though it was a state school, it still ran $40,000. She does not have a job and has been living with us for the duration of her college career and since her graduation. I also bought her a car to get back and forth from school when she finished high school. From time to time her deadbeat father would pop into her life and she would fawn all over him. Although he has not contributed a cent to her education or paid any child support, though that is my girlfriend's fault as CS was not part of the settlement, she still loves him and wants him in her life. He stays long enough to break her heart by skipping town and breaking some promise that he made her. The wedding venue holds 250 people max. I gave them a list of 20 people that I wanted invited, since I was paying for everything. They told me that was no problem and they'd take care of it. So I let these people know they'd be getting an invite and they should save the date. Saturday, I saw one of my friends on this list at the golf course and asked if he was coming. He told me that he wasn't invited. He told me that he got an announcement, but not an invitation. He had it in his back seat, along with probably 6 months of mail, and showed it to me. Sure enough, it was just an announcement, and my name was nowhere on it. It had her dad's name and her mom's name and not mine. This led to a pretty big fight with my girlfriend, as I found out that none of my list of 20 made the cut for the final guest list because 250 people is very tight. I was pissed, but not a hell of a lot I could do because the important people in my life had already been offended. My girlfriend said if some people didn't RSVP yes, I might be able to get a couple people in. But that is an ultimate slap in the face in my opinion. So, I was boiling on Saturday. Yesterday, we had a Sunday dinner with the future in-laws family and us and a surprise guest, the real dad. At this little dinner my stepdaughter announced that her real dad was going to be able to make it to her wedding and that now he'd be able to give her away. This was greeted with a chorus of "Oh how great and how wonderful s." I don't think I have ever felt so angry and so disrespected. I was shaking. I took a few seconds to gather my composure, because I honestly wasn't sure if I would cry or start throwing punches or both. Once I was sure I'd be able to speak I got up from my chair and said I'd like to make a toast. I can't remember exactly what I said but the gist of it was this: I'd like to make a toast. The sound of spoons against glasses ring in my ears. It has been my great pleasure to be a part of this family for the past 10 years. Aw, how sweet. At this point in my life I feel I owe a debt of gratitude to bride and groom, because they have opened my eyes to something very important. Confident smiles exchanged. They have showed me that my position in this family is not what I once thought it was. And now a glimmer of confusion and shock begins to spread on the faces in the room. Though I once thought of myself as the patriarch or godfather of the family, commanding great respect and sought out for help in times of need, it seems instead that I hold the position of an ATM, good for a stream of money, but not much else. As I have been replaced as host, both on the invitations and in the ceremony, I am resigning my financial duties as host to my successor, real dad. So cheers to the happy couple and the path they have chosen. I finished my drink. You all can let yourselves out. Is this selfish? I'm supposed to shell out 40 to 50 grand for a wedding that I can't invite anyone to? That I am not a part of? I'm so done with this crap. I'm done with my stepdaughter. I'm done with my girlfriend. I transferred the money out of our joint account last night. She has not had a job since she moved in with me. This morning I called all the vendors I had written checks to for deposits to refund my money. At present it looks like I'll lose around $1,500 for the venue, but the other vendors have been great about refunding. Update: how did you break your parents? The immediate aftermath was tantrum and people sitting there mumbling while not actually saying anything to me, but to each other. After much yelling with the girlfriend about me being selfish, I spent the night in my home office and no one knocked on my door, not once. Today's aftermath is kind of depressing for me. Girlfriend brought me bride's wedding planner to show me how much work I was ruining. I thumbed through it, found a page in the music section for father-daughter dances. All of the songs were catered to real dad's taste. So I thought they were just being disrespectful, but now I'm feeling like they never really gave a crap at all, especially since the menu included 2 ingredients I'm allergic to, that actually made me laugh. Either way, I'm glad to be done, returned the planner and asked her when she and bride could move out. Also, I never promised to pay for the wedding. I offered them the use of my home when they were sure it was going to be small, but other than that, all I've heard is how it's the bride's family that should pay, so, let it be the bride's family then, also known as, not me. Girlfriend and bride are now moved out. They are moving in with the groom. It was very hard not to be petty with some of the belongings they took with them, but it's done and I switched out the locks and now it's time for a brew. I can't believe how popular this story got, but I feel good to be given support by so many. If I find out what happens with the wedding, I will let you know, but I can't guarantee that I will put in the effort to find out. From what I've heard, they are trying to scale things back and get his parents to help out. Girlfriend burned bridges when I found out she tried to write herself a check on our joint account the day after the unpleasantness. By then I had already moved money, so I guess I'm a bigger ass than her, but I could feel it coming.
Next story.
Am I the a-hole for leaving my girlfriend over her disgusting habits? My girlfriend has always been a strong environmentalist. It was one of the things that attracted me to her in the first place. We met as co-workers when we both worked for a non-profit whose work focused on sustainability. We bonded over our mutual love for nature, and I started falling for her as soon as she asked me out on a hiking date. After that, there were many more hiking dates, and 3 years later, we are deeply in love and living together with our 2 dogs. I have since moved on from working for the non-profit, and even though she has been offered higher paying positions, my girlfriend has kept her job at the non-profit since she is so passionate about the work. This decision of hers has also resulted in me paying the majority of the bills since she has not gotten a raise since she started there. This didn't bother me. I love my girlfriend and I am grateful for the life we're able to share together. I have always admired her passion for the earth, and her driven attitude at her job has always stunned me. Yet lately, she has been stunning me in a different way. As I said, a big reason I fell for my girlfriend was because of her passion for environmentalism. But lately, she has been displaying some extremist behaviors. It all started when she got this new natural deodorant. She explained to me in a long rant about how bad normal deodorants were, and how their packaging was so wasteful. Her new deodorant comes in recyclable packaging and is aluminum free. The thing is, it straight up does not work. Ever since she started wearing it, she has had a certain BO funk about her. It ruins cuddle time, and we also have not been intimate for a while because of this problem. The last time I tried to be intimate with her, I was so turned off by her smell, I just asked her if we could stop. I have tried telling her about the way she smells, but she just brushes me off saying she can't smell it, and she was doing this for the earth. The deodorant was only the tip of the iceberg. Next, she replaced her toothpaste with a homemade herb blend, and she now only washes her hair once a month. My once lovely, fresh-smelling girlfriend now walks around smelling like a sewer drain. Everything from her breath to her pits to her hair now smells like a dumpster. I don't even know how I have managed to live with her and share a bed with her for this long since she adopted these habits. Recently, she started free bleeding instead of using pads or tampons, all in the name of sustainability. It's disgusting. She leaves patches of dried blood on our kitchen chairs and couch. When I try to plead with her to find more clean sustainability practices, she just scolds me for not caring about mother. After she started free bleeding, I started to think about breaking up. It was ripping me apart, since despite all this, I still loved her with all my heart, and I didn't want to give our life up. But I just couldn't take it anymore when I came home yesterday and found she had thrown away the bag of our dog's $80 food. I was confused when I couldn't find it, and I asked her if she had moved it. Without looking up from her computer, my girlfriend told me she had thrown the dog's food out, and that the dogs would be eating a vegan diet from now on. I reached my limit, and at that moment I absolutely lost it. I let out all my true feelings about her new habits. I told her how I was sick of her stink, that I was sick of her in general. I screamed that this vegan dog diet was complete bullshit, and neither of the dogs would be eating anything but the food they'd been eating for years. I started crying as I yelled. I felt like I was watching the death of our relationship. My girlfriend just stared at me. After I finished talking, all my girlfriend had to say was okay. She said I clearly wasn't serious about environmentalism, and that if I truly cared about the earth that I would support her. Her face was so cold, it was like she didn't even care. I knew at that moment that our love had come to an end. I didn't recognize the person in front of me. My heart broke. It's still broken, and now I'm all alone. Without my girlfriend, without my dogs, but at least I can actually breathe without gagging now.
Next story.
Try to accuse me of rope. Enjoy some jail time. My ex-wife accused me of intimate assault when I was 10 hours away. Then may have tried to trap me over a year later. This occurred 7 months after my wife and I separated. When we separated, she was sent to her mother's house, which was on the opposite side of the country. From there, she got kicked out by her mother, then her cousin, then her other cousin, etc. Basically everyone in her family saw her true self. Then she went off-grid. Right around the 7-month mark, neither my son or I had heard from her for months. I was bopping along at work. I've worked from home for over a decade. When I get a knock at the door, at 9 a.m., time is important. A deputy was at the door, and told me I was wanted for the sexual assault of my wife the previous night. I told him I had been home all evening, that this never occurred, and this was not the first time she made false allegations. TL, doctor, you won't buy me more vodka at midnight? Then I'm going to call the cops on you. I asked where she had stated the assault occurred. He gave me the name of a city that isn't in our state. It's not in an adjoining state. Driving, it takes 10 hours to get there. It's an hour away from the nearest airport, so even if I flew, it would be at least 8 hours. Then the kicker. Her report came in at around midnight. She was at a hotel, under the influence, and at a hospital detox. She claimed I was there, and hurt her. I asked the deputy if he was serious, or if this was a gag. He was dead serious. He didn't arrest me, but I had to go to their station and give a statement. In my statement I pointed out that it would be a 20-hour round trip by car. They let me go, never heard from them again. Now, fast forward to this year. Roughly 13 additional months have passed. Ex-wife had been communicating with our son more, but hadn't visited or seen him for over 18 months. She wanted to visit, he said yes but only in public. Perfect. We met at an outdoor local mall. It really sucked. 45 minutes before. My son asked to bail. He got tired of her not caring about what he was saying, and interrupting to talk about her cats or her tattoo that gives her power. She had some documents for me. My son doesn't know, but she signed off custody. When she went to the bathroom I looked through them quick, and noticed an item titled Victim Safe Harbor Plan. It was a document plan for her trip. Drawn up by a domestic violence shelter in the state she was living in. It listed me as the abuser, and her the victim. It had everything from don't tell him what hotel you are in, don't accept physical interaction. And don't get into his car. I hid it before she got back. Y'all. She asked me to drive her to her hotel. And mentioned that if I dropped our son off at home first, she could show me her new lingerie. She said that part in front of our son. Of course I declined. Our bedroom had been dead long before our separation. Once we got home, it kinda hit me. I read it again. My son caught me grumbling to myself, and asked to see it. I couldn't hide it. He had been reading over my shoulder. I was lost in thought. He looked it over, looked at me, and said, "Dad, she was trying to get you arrested." It shook me a bit, and still does to this day. I won't know if it was her plan, but if I had driven her to her hotel, she could have had someone watching. And claimed that she came back with bruises. If I had taken her up on her other invitation, all she would have to do was scream rope.
Next story.
Am I the a-hole for kicking my daughter-in-law out? I'm a young mother-in-law, I'm only 39. Had my kids pretty young and I am very lucky that my husband makes a lot of money so I don't have to work. I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and once they started to spread their wings instead of going to work my husband and I decided I would be a homemaker and be active in the community. That's what I have been up to and I try to make the community a better place. Now my oldest son is 22 and married and I was really excited until I met her. In general she is a very business-focused person that is very blunt. I actively dislike her, but I try to be polite for my son's sake. A few examples of why I don't like her: her wedding gift I handed over saying it was for me and my husband. She responded back with "just your husband since I know it wasn't your money that paid for it." Saying I am volunteering, well that's not a real job since it doesn't make money. It's passive aggressive, and yes I have talked to my son about it and even onces with her to try to clear the air. We had a get together last night and I made a homemade meal. When I was playing everything she came up and made the comment, "Other no wonder I could make a home cooked meal, I don't do anything else with my day." I lost it and told her that she needs to respect me or get the F out of my house. She was shocked and then started to cry when I did kick her out. My son is pissed and we had a huge argument and he called me a huge a-hole. I need an outside opinion.
Next story.
What's a disturbing secret that your family keeps? Why we don't see Uncle Mark anymore. This was told to me by my dad over a drink recently. He'd gotten a little drunk and ended up admitting it to me. Uncle Mark was my favorite uncle when I was a child. He always invited me around to show me his airsoft gun collection, hide and seek parties with my friends and even took us to the beach. He would always come with sweets for us and acted like one of us, another child who just wanted to have fun. But then, the day I, 7 years old, was meant to be going around because we were going for a ride to this amazing place. My dad was happy and cheerful for the entire day. He was going on about how much he loved the fact his brother wanted to be in his children's life. Until he got a call. I was in my room, packing my stuff when I heard the most blood-curdling scream from my dad. He was screaming and raging. I heard him rip open our front door and slam it back shut with enough force to make the picture next to it fall off the wall. I didn't see my dad for a long while after that, and he never told me why until we had this talk, but that shall be explained at the end. Mom had a lot of money saved up from a minor lotto win so we were okay, and she always smiled and said Daddy is just away for a little while because he was looking after me and my siblings whenever I asked where he was. Uncle Mark didn't come around either during this time, but we did see him in town a couple times. Funnily enough, he ran away the moment my mom saw me waving at him. 9 months later, Dad came home and I excitedly ran and hugged him. He hugged me right on back with a good squeeze. We had a party to celebrate him coming home. We had Perry food and cake and all the usual stuff. I was just happy my dad was home though. A week or so later, Dad sat me down with the other children and explained that Uncle Mark wouldn't be coming around anymore. When asked why, he just said Uncle Mark was a bad person and that if he ever tried to talk to us, we were to ignore him and come find one of them. We all agreed because my dad always knew best after all. One day, a year or so later, 9 at this point, I'm coming out of school to wait for my parents to pick me up. My other siblings were either at secondary school or too young for school, so it was just me. I see Uncle Mark stood there with a big grin. I get nervous when he comes up to me, saying he's here to take me for a ride. I tell him I'm not supposed to talk to him, that he's a bad person like my dad said. Uncle Mark got this scary look on his face for a second, then told me it was all good and his parents had changed their mind and made to take my hand. That's when I saw my dad just appear. My dad punched Uncle Mark right in the face and little old me saw blood fly as Uncle Mark went sprawling. I didn't see much after that except Uncle Mark running away with my dad chasing him. He came back after a little while, sighed and took me in a hug. He told my mom to take me home and that he'd see us later. I don't know why, but I knew there and then it would be a long time before I ever saw my dad again. And I was right. 5 years. 5 years my dad was gone. My mom eventually admitted to us that he was in prison for protecting us and we all guessed he'd done something to Uncle Mark. And he had. Turns out Uncle Mark liked kids. He liked them a lot. And that day I was meant to go to his house. My aunt, Uncle Mark's wife, had called my dad and told him she'd found some pictures under her and Mark's bed of children and she was scared of what to do because Mark was a big man and it was later revealed he abused her, so she was scared to call the police on him. And my dad had gone into a rage and stormed over to his house. He'd smashed in the door to find Uncle Mark screaming at my aunt as she waved the pictures around in hysterics. My dad had beaten Uncle Mark within an inch of his life. Uncle Mark screaming he'd make him pay as the police had arrested my dad. Messed up thing was, by the time my dad had explained why he had done it, Mark managed to get the pictures, burned them and scared his wife into saying nothing so there was no evidence. My dad was sent down for assault but made sure my other uncles and older cousins were around to protect us in case Mark came back. But oh no. Mark waited until my dad thought we were safe. And then, according to my dad, had come to kidnap me from the school right under their noses. Who would stop him? People didn't believe my dad when he explained Mark was a predator, they thought he was just excusing himself for attacking him. After all, the police hadn't found anything and his wife said my dad was a liar, whereas my dad was the big angry guy with a few assaults under his belt already. So all they saw was my nice uncle here to pick me up. He had gotten away from my dad at the school, my dad had tripped and it gave him the chance to run. But my dad knew where he would go. Knew Uncle Mark would run home to hide and more than likely destroy any evidence he had gotten since destroying the last lot. He also knew the police would be on his tail for the attack on the school so he didn't have long. Difference was, though, my dad had his car while Uncle Mark was on foot. So, he drove over and demanded to know if my aunt was going to lie again, after what Uncle Mark had just tried to pull. Now, I don't like my aunt much after what she pulled the first time, but I think in that moment she really realized what a monster my uncle was. He was willing to do this to her nephew just for pathetic revenge for being called out as a predator. She said she wouldn't stop my dad or save Mark this time. My dad ordered her to get all the evidence she could as he waited for Mark to appear. She came back down with pictures. Lots of pictures. He then told her to go, wait 1 hour and then call the police. He was ending this. And as Uncle Mark appeared, my dad, who had been waiting behind the wall of his garden, slammed him through the door of his house. And then proceeded to beat him to death in his doorway. He apparently towards the end couldn't see the floor through the blood. My dad was arrested on murder and did so without resistance, only saying he wished they'd done his job for him. But when it was revealed that Uncle Mark was indeed a predator who had attempted to kidnap me and the fact that they had to face the fact they had allowed a predator to run free, he was instead charged for manslaughter, his lawyer stating my father had gone into a protective rage and had only intended to render him harmless. Funnily enough, no one argued in defense of the predator for my dad getting the murder charges. He said he didn't regret it, but that he wished he had done something else purely so that he didn't miss out on so much of my life. I told him I was forever going to be proud of him for that, and that I loved him. I was a bit shocked I wasn't told just what Uncle Mark was for so long. But my dad asked if it would have made it any better to be told as a child what he really was, or now as a man who can handle the truth. And he was right. Me as a child would not have been able to mentally handle it. I'm barely able to handle it now.
Next story.
How did you get revenge on your cheating girlfriend? I fattened her up, got her addicted to cigs, put her on the streets, and turned everyone against her. My girlfriend of 5 years at the time and I were going through a rough patch. I had just entered my last year of medical school and was always busy. Even though we lived together, we never really spent time together anymore. Because of the sudden lack of free time, she got very lonely. She would tell me all about the conversations she had with these people, and at the time I was happy because it meant I could spend more time on my studies and I wouldn't feel bad about being unable to spend time doing things with her. One day she told me she got into role-playing. At first, I was a little weirded out, but she assured me that it was entirely innocent and platonic. She even invited me to watch it. I could tell she was really excited and having a good time, so I pushed aside my feelings because I still felt like I was wronging her. One day, she told me about this guy she met online. He was funny and smart and I would like talking to him. She and he became best friends very fast. They exchanged phone numbers and they would text all the time. I didn't think too much of it, because she had my very deepest trust, and honestly I didn't have time to think anything about it. This went on for a few months. Eventually, she started changing, although it was so slow I didn't notice. She stopped telling me about what went on online, she was never more than an arm's reach from her phone, and she changed her passwords on all of her devices. I was so afraid of losing her, I didn't push anything or ask about why she was changing. I figured it was all my fault because I was unable to spend time with her. One day though, I decided I needed to change for her benefit. I talked with my doctor and got my prescription changed. I was able to focus much better and as such we were actually able to do things again. She was ecstatic, and our relationship improved fivefold. Everything was going great until the revelation. One day, while studying, my laptop crapped out on me. I asked if I could use hers, and although she was hesitant, she let me use her laptop, although she never gave me the password. Even though this was normal at this point, I could still tell something was off. Despite this, I was too focused on my work to care. Right as I was finishing up, a Skype message came up. It was her friend from online, the one she constantly texted. I realized at that moment that I never heard about what happened between them anymore. I'd completely forgotten about him. I opened up the chat window and started scrolling up. What I saw floored me. I quickly installed a remote access Trojan, downloaded the Skype chat logs, and gave her laptop back like nothing happened. She didn't notice a thing. Later on, I opened her chat logs, and to this day I wish I hadn't. I wish I just broke up with her then, but my curiosity got the better of me. For months they had been sending explicit messages to each other. They'd webcammed for hours in the messages I saw. She said things to him she'd never said to me. She called him her master. When he got mad at her she begged for his forgiveness. I discovered she had started paying for his internet and phone bills because she couldn't stand to be without talking to him. And it wasn't just intimate messages. They also sent truly heartfelt messages to one another. Love was tossed about frequently. She said the only reason she hadn't left me is because I gave her whatever she wanted. I was instantly nauseous, my vision narrowed, my heart started pounding, and my blood ran cold. For about 2 or 3 weeks I was in a deep depression. Here she was, sending him all these messages, but she seemed so happy with me. I had no idea what I was going to do. One night though, something just snapped. I wasn't going to stand for this, and she needed to pay. Developed a multi-step plan for revenge. I lost something that night. I no longer trust anyone else, nor do I really feel strongly about anything anymore. Using the data I got from the keylogger, I accessed her Skype account and started sabotaging their relationship. I would act as her. I acted belligerent, scheduled webcamming sessions, and then would not show up. I told him not to text her phone because I was getting suspicious. Luckily, he was the type to get angry easily. Furthermore, he knew nearly all of her close online friends, oftentimes better than she did. One day she came to me, tears in her eyes, and told me that all of her friends had, for some reason, started hating her. She was crying because she was all alone, but I assured her that we still had each other. Now, all of our free time was spent together again. Our relationship grew ever stronger, or so she thought. I also started lifting weights. I started cooking high-calorie meals, and she ate whatever I gave to her. Whereas we both ate around 2,000 calories a day before, now we ate 3,500 calories per day. I gained a lot of muscle, and she just gained a lot of fat. After 9 months, I was in better shape than I'd ever been, and she was in the worst shape of her life. I reassured her that I still loved her for who she was, though, and she seemed content with it. After she had gained around 40 pounds, I bought anti-smoking patches, and I applied them to her in her sleep and took them off before she woke up. This literally got her addicted to me. Whenever I was away for a few days I would get texts and calls where she seemed like she was on the verge of breaking down. Because of her weight gain, she found it difficult to do her job. She would always come home dead tired, and in pain. I helpfully suggested to her that she quit her job. I could easily support both of us on my residency salary. She took that suggestion and took it fast. She walked out of her job the very next day. Now over a year had passed since I learned she was cheating on me. At this point, she was out of a job, very overweight, and still friendless. She was dropping hints about a ring, and I thought it was the perfect way to finalize my revenge. We went shopping for a wedding ring, and I made sure to get the ring with the 60-day return policy. I proposed to her later that week. I was able to convince her to sign a prenuptial, making sure that we all got our own stuff and the ring would get returned, by withholding the nicotine patches and putting her through withdrawal, thus weakening her resolve. Her parents were overjoyed, as they loved me like a son at this point. After a month of being engaged, I confronted her about it and she started breaking down. I instantly broke off the engagement, ignoring her threats of unaliving herself. I regretfully told her parents about what she had done. At first, they didn't believe me, until I showed them the logs, and they were horrified. They apologized for their daughter's actions, saying she wasn't brought up this way, and that she would no longer be welcome in their house. Our friends quickly learned on Facebook, and they universally rejected her. It helped that I acted heartbroken and depressed. At this point, she was now homeless, friendless, jobless, without family, in poor physical shape, and addicted to cigarettes. I stopped talking to her, but from what I can tell she got on Social Security to make ends meet. Last I heard, she got arrested for substance charges. I am now a practicing physician and have plenty of close friends. I don't regret a single thing I did.
Next story.
I discovered what really went down at my fiancée's bachelorette party. I don't think I can marry her anymore. My fiancée is the love of my life. She's my ideal woman and I wouldn't change a thing about her. But recently I had started feeling insecure about our relationship. I'm not proud to admit it, but I decided to snoop on her phone last night. While looking through her phone I saw a notification go off. A message from her friends about the bachelorette party came in, so I started obsessing over it like a stalker from TV. I stayed up all night checking her computer and Facebook messages, and discovered she had cheated during the party. By cheating, I don't mean getting a strip tease or something, which I would be okay with. I understand it's a bachelorette party, but she actually gave a stripper some slop and ended up going home with another one that night. She has this other guy added on Facebook, but the chat merely consists of a message that says, "Had a good time and it was nice to meet you." The date goes back to the night of the bachelorette party. I have read the messages between her and her friends. They have a small group and I found out what she'd done there. It all seems as if it was a one-time thing that happened, but I am a mess. I haven't slept all night, and she is headed for work in an hour. We were supposed to get married in 3 weeks. We were planning on buying a house together, having kids and growing old. I feel like I want to throw all of that out the window. I am sitting here smelling like liquor, feeling sloshed and depressed. Honestly, I just wanted to stomp her out. I left in the morning to take a smoke. My head was still messed up, but other than this night, nothing I found indicated anything else. I guess she wanted this to be her last night before settling down or something. I honestly don't know and I don't care. When I was outside taking a smoke, about 15 to 20 minutes or something after I left, she had woken up. She noticed the drinks out and asked me what I had been up to. Basically came to give me a kiss and a hug. I followed through with it but honestly felt empty doing it. I didn't want to give her any hints of what I knew. She asked why I had been drinking and why I didn't come to sleep last night. I told her I was just having some nightmares, but everything was fine. I felt detached, like I was watching myself in the third person through a TV or something. She asked me if any stress was related to the marriage and the plans. And I just told her something along the lines of, "I love you. How can you be stressed about the best thing in your life?" She got herself ready and left for work. I basically started packing my most important things. I called and canceled the venue where we were supposed to be having the wedding. Apparently, they took 15% of the money for canceling early because we were having such a big event. I told them it's fine and I really don't care at this point. I also saved screenshots of everything and have taken them with me. Around 1 p.m., I called a taxi and went to stay at a hotel about 60 miles away from my city. I didn't leave any notes or pictures at home, I just left. I just needed the alone time in the hotel to think everything through and process what had happened. At around 3:30 p.m., my phone started getting spammed with calls from my ex-fiancée. I started getting calls and messages from her sister, her friends, her parents, my parents and a few of our mutual friends. The only person I called back was my dad and my mom. I have huge trust in my parents. I basically spilled the beans and told them a nicer story about what happened. I asked my dad not to say anything and also asked my mother not to say anything. I told them it's ended, it's over and that I won't be getting married anymore. I also told them not to tell anyone about what I told them. I didn't tell them exactly what happened, just that I found out she wasn't being loyal to me. I didn't think giving details would help anyway. Around 5 p.m. my dad calls me back and tells me that my ex-fiancée is completely hysterical and is basically broken down. Completely not understanding what is going on. I just told my dad not to intervene and that I need some alone time now. I basically just shut my phone down and I've been staying silent ever since. Her sister knew about what happened at the bachelorette party. And I have the text to prove it. She even laughed about it and told her not to feel guilty because it was a bachelorette party and that women should just go all in on that night. I really feel like Neo in the Matrix dodging bullets in slow motion. However, instead of dodging bullets, I have dodged a floozy wife and unwanted children. With this wife's endless fights and tons of depression, I honestly feel a lot better knowing that my life will get better. Unfortunately, she has broken down and is begging me to take her back. So is her sister and her friends. They also came up with the worst excuse of what actually happened. I had this gut feeling that she was going to come up with an excuse of some sort. I picked up the phone and the first thing I heard was a torn voice. I could hear she had been crying all day and was in a messed up state. She kept begging me to come back, that there was an explanation for everything and that she loved me. She said I had misunderstood the entire situation. I told her to explain it to me right then and there. She said because I only saw a small part of the conversation that it's all been misunderstood, that I should come back home, and that I had made an irrational decision to leave. During the entire conversation, I was just giving really short, empty answers in a cold manner. After she told me it was all a misunderstanding, I told her to call me back in 10 minutes and to check Messenger. After I hung up, I sent her the entire conversation with a ton of screenshots. Not all of them, but most of the important ones. It didn't take 2 minutes for her to call back crying hysterically, saying she was sorry for everything, that she wanted to die rather than lose me. She said she was forced by her friends and her sister to have fun one last time, and that she needed to let all the energy out before stepping into a marriage for life. I stayed silent. The more I didn't talk and just said okay, the more she was crying. She started telling me that I could sleep with other women if I wanted to get back at her or that she would tell everyone about what she did so I could take her back. I told her sleeping with other women was not something I needed because the moment I met her and started loving her, she was the only woman I wanted. I didn't need to meet or sleep with someone to know the best thing in my life was waiting at home. She kept begging and begging, so I just told her if she comes clean to her parents and her family, I would think about it. After that, she started saying something but I just hung up. Suddenly, her father called me up and apologized for everything. He and his wife know what happened now and he was so sorry for all of this. He told me he understood how I felt and that he didn't raise his daughter to do that. His wife basically stole the phone from him and told me that her daughter had never been this destroyed before. I politely told her that I appreciated her opinion and then I said, I have to go, goodbye. My ex-fiancée calls me back and begs me again saying she told her parents and also sent a text message to our mutual friends about what happened. She kept apologizing on the phone and I didn't say much. After some time, I just told her not to cry, and that she shouldn't be apologizing because single women like herself are allowed to do these things and I hope she finds Mr. Right. She starts crying even harder. My ex-fiancée is unable to breathe and hands the phone off to her sister. She grabbed the phone and said, we told everyone what happened, are you going to take her back? I only said I would think about it. She then tells me that her sister is turning into a dangerous situation of wanting to unalive herself because of all of this. The only thing I said after she told me that was, it's a good thing you are close to her so you can make sure she doesn't do that to herself. Maybe take her to a doctor or something. After this, I just hung up. My phone has been blowing up with messages from everyone and I don't plan on responding. I honestly feel a lot better right now, like I can move on.
Next story.
My husband is cheating on me with our dogs. I, 28F, have a daughter, 3 months. Honestly, I didn't want to have children because I was the oldest of 5 and always had to all-around care for everyone I had ever been with. Me and my man played with fire and got burned. I am happy as a mom, truly. I love this baby more than I thought possible, and she makes me smile even when I'm crying. My fiancé, 28M, is a great dad when he is actively trying. I know he loves her and me so much, so I hate complaining or even having building resentment going on. He's been helping around the house sometimes, doing laundry, and feeding the dogs now, which he rarely did before. Because I did it all. And I've been appreciative. However, I am getting annoyed. Especially at the fact that he's never even tried to help at night, putting her to bed, feedings. Anything. Despite my complaints, tears, and several occasions expressing that I need help. I have made every excuse in the book for him. My toxic trait. Maybe he's too tired? He works a normal job, Monday through Friday, 7 to 4. He says when he comes home, his brain is fried from the heat, and he needs a little bit to unwind, which I get. He works outside in the 100+ degree heat right now in direct sunlight all day. I feel for him. I am self-employed, so I can handle being home with her all day and make my schedule. But even when I get up at 5:30 a.m. for a job, I have to keep her all night and take her with me. Tonight she is still fighting her sleep at 1:20 a.m. Every time I get her to pass out, I go to lie down, and she's back awake crying. Where I know he hears us. I know he can see and witness how exhausted I am during the day, and I just thought once a month, maybe I would get some assistance. He comes home and showers, watches YouTube on his phone and then gets on his PC and Discord till whatever time to eat almost every day. I don't even have time to take a shit by myself, wash my pump parts and bottles till they pile up, and cook. Most days, and I have to wait for him to be done gaming so I can shower every night. I don't have time to open my laptop to work most days, either. I'm not getting work out as fast as I wish, and I'm unable to market/promote or even schedule posts much, so I'm not getting as many bookings, and we have separate bills/finances. Luckily, I set back money when I found out I was pregnant, but I'm almost through it all. My dogs are unkempt and barely get attention. I wish I had an hour of free time for F's sake. Yes, I've told him these things, and last week, we got in a fight, and I reiterated that it's been 3 months of her life, and I hadn't gotten 1 4-6 hour window of continuous sleep except when his sister sat in our living room and watched her while I slept with him home when I was about to have a mental break. That is so mentally draining. I am unhappy with my body, and my mental is getting darker on lack of sleep. I also told him I feel like he's missing the best parts of her cause he's not very involved. He has only changed a small portion of diapers, and he only holds her a half full of times a day, and half the time puts her in her swing. I don't want to come home when I go to my mom's or mother-in-law's. Why? So I can watch him play games and ignore us, or watch TV or scroll like I do every effing day cause I'm locked in my seat if she's feeding or sleeping. He's heard us next to him when she wakes up and knows when I leave the room crying. Lately, he asks if I'm okay, and I'm verbally not okay. But I feel like he doesn't give a shit cause he has never gotten up or rolled over to help, even when tears are rolling from me. I am a good mom. I handle it most of the time with no tears, but some nights are so hard. I've been breastfeeding, which is another excuse I've given him. Still, I've had a reserve for him to feed her in the fridge and freezer since the second week. When I got pregnant, I thought I wanted 2 kids, so she wasn't an only child, but at this rate, how could I even handle? I'm so sad. It's turning into depression, I think. And I am afraid my relationship will fail because I realize he just doesn't care as I thought. Anyway, I popped off a few days ago and said I didn't sign up for this, being a single parent, and he said that was hurtful. I proceeded to tell him what was hurtful was having to do it all and still pay all my bills and handle all the things I handled before. It's impossible and unfair. I don't know how else to get through to him, and I'm over trying. What do I do? Am I the a-hole? After all that, I went out to feed the dogs one day and saw my husband crouched in the doghouse. He seemed to be exerting a lot of effort, so I rounded the corner, and lo and behold, he was holding the effing chihuahua and face effing it.
Next story.
15 years ago my parents declared me legally dead to steal my money. Now they want to reconcile. This story began over 30 years ago in Germany. I had just turned 16 and was accused of stealing a neighbor's car and wrecking another neighbor's fence with it while running away from the police. I was drunk when the police picked me up, as it was legal to drink in Germany at this age. I proclaimed my innocence but nobody believed me. I was convicted and sentenced to 500 hours of community service because I was unrepentant. My parents used it as a tool to take away my time with my friends. They got the judge to agree that I had to work Friday and Saturday evenings at the THW, which was an organization that provided disaster relief and sometimes soup kitchens. Also, I lost my license for mopeds and could not get a driver's license till 20. In addition, when I finally wanted to get my license I would have to pass a psychological test. Also, I had saved about $5,000 for a car, but this was used to pay for damages. Sadly it worked. My friends soon lost interest in me because I was not available to party during the weekend. Also, we were very vehicle oriented and I was destined to be a pedestrian for 4 years. An uncle of mine, who led the local THW, conveniently lost my timesheets for my community service work, which forced me to work there for 14 months. By the time I finished, I had a bit over 900 hours in community service. When I came out, my parents told me they had asked my uncle to keep me there longer so that I would be forced to learn to take responsibility for my actions. They also justified this, saying that they were doing it for my own good and to save me from my friends. However, I finished my hours unrepentant and furious with them for essentially doubling my sentence. When I finished, I was in great shape and did well in school as I lost my friends and had no interest in acquiring new ones after seeing how fickle they were. Focusing on academics was an outlet that was not forced on me by others and I enjoyed it. Then I found out who had actually crashed the car. I told the police and my parents and tried to get my sentence repealed. I tried to have a retrial but failed because my sentence was already served. On top of that, the guy who actually did the deed was sentenced to only 100 hours of community service. At his trial it came out that several people had known it was him, including my parents who made him pay for the damages almost a year ago. They had put the money in a bank account, which they told me I would get, once I had finished my education. They also told me they added what would now be equal to $8,000 to the savings account for the hours I had put in with the THW, which was a generous wage for a teenager. Still, I was furious with them because I still had to wait until I was 20 to get a driver's license. If they had told me sooner I could have gotten the sentence repealed. Also, while they claimed I would get this money in about 5 years, for now they had essentially stolen my savings. They refused to give it back because I was 17 and too immature to make my own choices. After a huge fight I took my tent and camped out in the woods. I still went to school every day but refused to come back home. After a week they called the cops on me and they took the tent and forced me to go home. However, once the police left, so did I. I slept wherever I could, which was mostly barns and in the woods if the weather was good, since I now had no tent. On occasion the police found me. My parents called them every day for help. If caught, I would be forced to go home. They'd lock me in a room, but I simply waited for school and disappeared after school was out. When I finally turned 18, the police could not force me to go home. I only had half a year left of school, so I continued like this. I had no friends because I smelled funny and no interest in getting any friends because I was hurt. I was not going to let anybody close to hurt me again. Despite it all, I managed to finish school with good grades. After school, I used the mandatory military service to disappear. I volunteered for service abroad, which meant Eastern Europe at the time. After 2 years, I was done and had a nice nest egg. I enrolled in a university and studied chemistry. I found 3 good friends and met my first girlfriend, to whom I am now married. Everything went well for a while. Then my life spiraled. I was 29 and working on my doctorate when my parents managed to find me. Occasionally they convinced the police to look for me as a missing case. The police usually found me and I'd tell them that I was fine but wanted no contact with my parents, and that was it. The police would deliver the message and say that they couldn't tell them where I was and that they should please stop involving the police. Then my parents had a genius idea. They filed paperwork that I had died in an accident in Italy. They were my next of kin, so the police gave them my address. Meanwhile, my bank account was frozen and the university told me that I was no longer allowed to work on my doctorate while being legally dead. Everything in my life stopped working for me. 2 days into this disaster and my parents are in front of my flat demanding to talk to me, telling me that I forced them to take this step. They forced their way inside my home and told me that they were staying until I was willing to talk to them and mend bridges. I told them if they insisted, they could have the flat. I took my laptop, a few mementos, important documents and a bag full of clothes. I left the keys and walked out. It took me a few months to convince the bureaucracy that tales of my death were widely exaggerated. My landlord was very understanding and gave me everything that was left in my flat after my parents understood that I would not be coming back. They mostly took the photos I had left in the flat. They left a letter which I burned. I was really pissed because being dead caused so many troubles. I was afraid they would find me again, so I took a job in another city as soon as I finished my doctorate. That was about 15 years ago. They have found me again. This time they sent a relative who told me that they were sorry. That they did mean for me to flip out and abandon my house when they found me back then. They were sorry for letting their emotions get the better of them. They would respect it if I still wanted no contact, but they would love to have my wife and I for dinner. Honestly, I am not sure what to do.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.